about next directions. But I thought what was fascinating about yesterday's discussion was the shift in, and I think, Mark, Perna, I have to give you credit. I'm stealing some of your words, so forgive me. Yeah, I'll buy you a drink later. But the discussion was about shifting the paradigm. And it's really begin to talk about, we're too siloed in our education and workforce system. And so career development has become very siloed. It isn't about whether it's CTE, whether it's 2-year, 4-year certificate. We keep talking in these silos rather than really beginning to talk about, how do we help individuals get the information and the guidance they need to create their own pathway. And as was talked about also in the sessions, is that those pathways are changing, because the world of work and especially because the technology is changing. And, so we need to get out of the thoughts about the niches and think about the student, not about how it's presented, but about the student. And I thought that shift was, and it's maybe a nuance because it's certainly happening somewhere, was really fascinating, and I love that. And also the focus on human skills. And I like that term. We talk about personal skills, employability skills, soft skills. I like the whole term of human skills, and that regardless of what pathway you're going through, regardless of how many jobs you're in, every individual needs to have those human skills that are applied to a job that is constantly going to be changing. And so I thought to me, it was very exciting to hear that, and to have industry, education, policy leaders from the national level really talking and engaged in that kind of dialogue sets the stage for the work that this Coalition for Career Development Center can do to take advantage of what's out there, but really begin to explore new ways of looking at how do we move forward, and how do we look at things somewhat differently. How do we help individuals to begin to chart their own path? And you get these messages pop up on your screen while you're doing it, and it throws me off sometimes. Sorry. Spencer, would you do me a favor? Ron's having trouble with the link, so send it to him again.
Sure. Yeah, look at that. He's coming right on. He's coming right on.
Okay, thank you. The staff just sent me a note. So, so today we're going to continue that discussion. Hello, Mr. Painter. And we're going to continue that discussion with, we have 2 dynamite panels that are looking at it from sort of that collective area of how do we change. Yes, it's about policy, but how do we change the development, the organization of what we're doing? And I'm so excited about the first panel. And then we're going to also look at the whole issue of equity and diversity, which is critical to, and it was brought up yesterday, critical what we're talking about. And then finally leading into what information do we need? What research do we need to conduct? What is being done now? How do we collect it? How do we move forward on that? So I'm just thrilled with all of you back here today. And I encourage you to use the chat box with any comments, with any questions that you have. And I am actually going to, Ron, have you start a little early, because I am so excited about this first panel. I want you to have more time. And so we'll keep you on time, but have more time. So it's really my pleasure to introduce, this panel, they're all good friends, to introduce Ron Painter, who is the Executive Director for the National Association of Workforce Boards. And I'm going to let Ron introduce the panel, but this is going to be an interesting panel looking at it from how do we drive from the national level? How do we drive it? Bring in the states into that discussion. What needs to begin to change to create a new roadmap for career development? So, Mr. Painter, good morning. No, it's good afternoon. Sorry, it's still morning.
I think it's good morning where you are, right?
Where I am, it is. So it's all
Denver,
yours,
Colorado. But I am here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It is afternoon. Thanks, Jan, and good to see everybody. I see Sam Bottom here, and that's great, because if there's somebody I know that could use career development help, no. Now this is a great panel. I am really excited. Oh, Bryan Albrecht's here also. Like, oh, we have the answers. We have the answers here today. We have a great panel coming up. A couple of these folks I have known a while. It is a treat to get an opportunity to chat with them. Kim Green and I have known each other a while. One of the things the pandemic has robbed us of is the ability to hang out and have coffee. And I sorely miss that, Kim, but it's great to have you here. Let me introduce the panel. First of all, Lauren Fairley, and I hope I said that right, Lauren, is here. She is from the Department of Labor's Office of Workforce Investment. Great to have you joining us. Appreciate the department. Kim Green is the Executive Director of AdvanceCTE, and Amanda Winters is the Program Director Post-Secondary at the National Governors Association. So I think you can all see we've got three people who really do understand this issue and can help the conversation. Let me kick it off, and I'm just going to ask each of you to spend a couple of minutes. Most of us probably are familiar with you or the organization, but if you can just give us like that 30,000 foot view in a way that I would understand, Kim. So you really have to dumb this down. So I get this, but Lauren, tell us a little bit about what all is in the Workforce Investment Office of DOL.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. And my panelists may not be so familiar with me, but I'm sure that you're familiar with Pam Frugally, who I work with, and we've worked together for 13 years on ONET and Career One Stop. So she gave me the opportunity to come and talk today, and I'm absolutely thrilled because she knows that career advising is my passion. So I'm thrilled to be here today, but to talk to you a little bit about Employment and Training Administration and their mission. Our primary goal is to provide high quality job training, employment and labor market information. And we run the American Job Centers that are across the nation. So we provide the funding and the resources, technical assistance to American Job Centers. All of that comes out of ETA. My specific division is the Division of National Programs, Tools, and Technical Assistance. Try saying that really fast. And specifically, I'm in the E-Tools unit. I'm the Federal Project Officer for ONET and Career One Stop. And those are things that I'm sure that many are familiar with. Those are tools that have been around for some time. And ONET being the world's most comprehensive occupational database, Career One Stop is like a virtual American Job Center that has a ton of resources in it. It's a very comprehensive tool for all types of job seekers, youth, career counselors, re-entry, individuals that are looking to re-enter the workforce. So all of those tools come out of my unit. In my other life, I am an adjunct professor at University of Maryland Global Campus. I used to be University of Maryland University College. I began teaching courses in career planning there in 2006. So when I first started, we had mainly face-to-face courses, and I was armed with my PowerPoint, a couple of little assessments, and of course, the Department of Labor tools. And things have just progressed over the last 15 years. I'm so excited about all of the new technology that helps to, teach career planning a lot easier. So I'm absolutely thrilled to talk about, some of the technical advances that I've seen over the years. I'm out of the first year experience program there for students, and I teach a career exploration course, mainly to freshmen. It's a mandatory course that they take, and it's about connecting students not only to or expanding their knowledge base on careers, but also connecting them to degrees and programs. And we also work a lot to help them self-assess during that first year. And then the other course that I teach is career planning, where we actually work on developing a career plan. So again, all of that's in my other life. So I have 2 lives. So I'm thrilled to be here. I hope that gives you a sense of why I'm here and why it's important for me to be here. Thanks so much.
Awesome. And Lauren, we're going to come back in that first question, because I think the department's done a lot of work. By the way, I'm a big fan of a lot of your coworkers. You have some great people over there, Kim and Robin and Pam and a whole crew. So good stuff. But we're going to come back because I think this sense that you have given us around what you guys have done, what the department's done, your unit in particular over the last few years, want to come back and talk about certainly the role of the feds and the role of tech. But let me move to Amanda Winters, National Governors Association. Like, I think most of us have probably heard about governors, but you got a whole unit inside NGA around post-secondary. Talk about like what the scope of that work is for you all.
Yeah, definitely excited to be here. And unlike Lauren, I do not have the energy for 2 lives. I just have the one and can barely hold that together sometimes. So this is actually my first day back in the office in 14 months. Yay. So it feels bizarre. I'll just let you guys know who haven't.
And the plants are dead, right?
Like everything, like I know it looks like a hostage video behind me because there's no pictures or pretty things on the wall. So forgive the blandness behind me. I'm dealing with my essentially feeling like I'm working from a model home right now. But excited to tell you all about some of the work we're doing at the National Governors Association and to interact with my valued colleagues on this panel about some of these overarching issues. So for those of you who are not familiar with the National Governors Association, we are the Association for Governors, no big surprise there, but we have sort of 2 different functions. It's really 2 organizations in one. We have one that's really the association that really deals with sort of connecting to the Hill and doing advocacy and communication. And then we have the Center for Best Practices, which is the technical assistance and consultative arm of the National Governors Association. So that's where I live, and that's where a lot of our policy experts live. We deal with policies all the way across the whole education and workforce continuum, but also in energy and in health and in transportation and in criminal justice. So anything that you'd have a governor's advisor for, we have a space within our center that helps to support and speak to the policies that are priorities for your governors. So,
and I think that's the interesting point, Amanda. Most of us, I jokingly said, most of us know what a governor is, but I don't think people realize that NGA, anything that the governor, like advisory boards that sit at the governor's office, questions of policy the governor may have, or one of his staff or her staff have, you guys deal with a lot more than just what we might think a governor does. Which is
definitely
handsomely with legislators, right?
Well, of course. I mean, that's the primary relationship. Now, we won't talk about that contention in this conversation, but I
think it's important, right? Because
it definitely is.
They like the president, they set an agenda, right. And a lot of that is discussed with you guys.
Yeah, and we have the privilege of supporting the governors in all of these conversations, which a lot are which I think is what we're going to talk about here. A lot of this is cross agencies and across sort of streams of work, and it's intersectional, and so provides us really cool opportunities to dive into some of the issues. Specifically this morning was talking with the state around racial equity and education opportunities. So really those intersection points between critical areas of priority for governors across the political spectrum. So I'm excited to be able to talk about this really broad topic we have today around career development and career readiness, which has a lot of meanings for governors and for state level work. So very excited to be able to join you all. I've been in the DC area about 3.5 years doing this work. Prior to that was at a SHIO agency and at a university doing some work around advising. So this really falls into my wheelhouse and my area of passion. So thanks for the opportunity to join the conversation today.
Great to have you. Kim Green, my coffee buddy, my policy kumbaya. Hey, great to have you here. You are the executive director of AdvanceCTE. Talk a little bit about AdvanceCTE. Name change a few years ago. Mission the same. This is a sweet spot, right?
Yeah, well, it's delightful to be here. I want to say thanks to Jan and Leo for their leadership in getting the coalition started. And I have the honor of serving on the board of the coalition. So delighted to be here, both from that perspective, but also for this panel, despite the moderator. So, well, AdvanceCTE, yes, I've been with our organization for 28 years now. So I've gone from the youngest person at the table to now I've been called the historian, which is just hard to believe. But our organization, you asked in the question kind of to share a tidbit that people might not know, our organization is actually in its 101st year. So we've been around since the federal government started investing in what was then called vocational education. Actually, before the federal government started investing in education writ large or workforce development, it was investing in vocational education. And we represent state career and technical education directors in all 50 states, the US territories, and the District of Columbia. Our members' responsibilities span CTE all the way back to upper elementary school through middle school, high school, workforce development, community college programs. And our main kind of charge, and I think where Ron and I intersect, is we support our members by doing federal advocacy work, we do state policy work and technical assistance, and we also work to try to lift up replicable best practices and research. We also, I think, and I've always tried to kind of run our organization as a model of what we want to see in states. And so we really try to be an organization that is known for not promoting the status quo, but for charging ahead and creating new pathways through bold leadership, and specifically and recently really making sure that we're forward-leaning, fiercely committed to equity and quality, and collaborative in the creation and execution of measurable and impactful results. Recently, one way we've done that is that we've put out a shared vision for the future of CTE that is called CTE Without Limits, and it's organized around 5 principles, and CCD Coalition is one of the signers onto that, that vision. And the goal of that vision includes a deep commitment to career development, career navigation that is really centered and driven by learners. So I hope that wasn't too policy wonky and more plain spoken, Ron. You're muted, Ron.
Oh, sorry. It was fine. It was fine, Kim. And I will give a public shout out and a thanks to you. I think I really appreciate our conversations, because I think this connection between the workforce development boards, WIOA, and what is happening in CTE. I heard it yesterday from a local board talking about we've got to build a better bridge between what's happening in the PK through 12 system, what a young person may know and come to learn, and then where do they go from there? We've got to do a better job. So, I appreciate everything. Let me come back and ask. One of the questions I want to ask is your opinion, and I'm going to start with you, Kim. So, anytime we do this around education issues, workforce issues, there are 3 levels of people involved in this. Locals, whether that's local organizations or local electeds. We've got states involved in this. We got the feds in this. With regard to career development, what do you see as the roles of each of those levels?
Well, 2 of your panelists were for organizations that are from states. So of course, we're going to say the states should be leading this work. But I will kind of go quickly through my opinion about each level. I mean, I do think there's a role for the federal government. I think there's a role for the federal government, not only in this issue, but broader issues around being the backstop for equity and making sure that across the country, we've got kind of comparable investment and equitable access to high quality programs, including career development programs. I think a shared goal of the federal government and states is to create what I'm going to call kind of moonshot goals, right? So like what's the catalyst to see transformative change and to create investments to help move us forward in a not significant way, I think is an appropriate role for the federal government. I also think the federal government has, and there's a duality of this, of creating guardrails, but also removing barriers. So, right, so sometimes those guardrails become barriers. And I think it's kind of being very nimble, which is not something the federal government does well, of trying to find that balance. And the last piece I would say, and again, I think this is a role for the federal government and states, is around accountability and collecting data. So I think the accountability lies within states, but I think the ability to collect data and investing in data, given the portability and mobility of learners and workers and work, should happen with the federal government. I'll just say quickly, so as not to take kind of the whole list away, but I do think the determination of quality stays with states. And I think states have a responsibility of ensuring quality and consistency within their systems. And I think importantly at the local level, this is where relationships are built. Not to say the states don't do this, but the locals need to be building relationships with employers. It's where the colleges and K-12 educators are building deep-rooted relationships. And they know what the needs are in their communities. And so I think those relationships get built at the local level, and that's where innovation is incubated, and the states have the responsibility to scale that innovation. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Cool. I certainly appreciate those thoughts. I think one of the things that I have said is that while we can name the assets in Washington, D.C., we know what those assets are. How they play out at the local level where it's actually got to be done, and the trust has got to be built. With that, I'm going to come to you, Amanda. I see you nodding. I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask the same question. What do you see as the role for, you're in the middle here, what do you see as the role for the feds? What do you see as what your expectations at the local level are?
Well, it's going to be no surprise, already based on what Kim had said, that I'm going to be like, states. Go states when talking about moving some of this work forward, but there's certainly definite roles for everybody. So I would say put a focus in on the states and then look at the feds and the locals from there. I think a lot of the things, I would echo a lot of the things that Kim was sharing. I think states have a unique opportunity to provide definitions and alignment, as well as as data considerations, because of course you got to measure what you're defining and what you're prioritizing. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, this topic lives in different spaces at both the federal and state and the local level. So I have a tendency to speak about like states, but as like they're a monolith. But within the state, you've got your departments of labor and commerce, and you've got your licensure and certification agencies, and you've got your departments of higher ed and your departments of education, and maybe your community college system. So you've got lots of folks around a table talking about what career development means. And you got to all start, got to make sure you're rowing the boat in the same direction. And that's a critical role that governors play, but also their advisors and their agency leads of, how are we going to do this together, and the shared understanding of the direction we're moving in, and also making sure that you're leveraging your industry assets across all of this work in ways that make sense for the whole continuum. So I think that there's sort of that alignment and definitional piece, the vision piece of where we're all going together and who is playing what role as part of the state in this work. But then also thinking about the federal government, totally agree with Kim here in that sort of backstop for equity and the ways in which monies are distributed to states and then to localities, like thinking about investment that makes sense and parameters around gathering evidence and really, proving outcomes for students and value for students. I think there's a strong state and federal connection there around the conversation around quality, but would also agree that that quality conversations need to happen at states, and they have ownership of those sort of being the gatekeeper of we want lots of options for students and lots of great options, but we want quality options for them. And that's where the state comes in, is making sure that those options that come into their, their constellation of opportunity are all quality options, and they can go in lots of different directions, knowing that somebody's, some agency has been a safeguard for them to make sure that these are good, will have good outcomes for them. And then at the local level, I would just throw in that, the connections, the clear connections between regional economies and the growth of some of these conversations around what local employers need, local employers value in the way of certifications and skills, is sort of the coloring inside of the lines that, the states draw the lines, and then the local areas figure out what that looks like for us. And what do our industries need, and what do our students need, what do our learners need? And so I think also the state has an obligation to listen to their local areas and their regions about what they need and where investment would best serve students, and how the state can direct their priorities to move and scale and move some of these programs forward that are really proven to serve students well. So that's my continuum.
I'm gonna come back, Amanda, and ask you more about the notion of quality. As I mentioned, when I'm not in DC, I sit here in the Commonwealth. Having worked for the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, we all know there's Pittsburgh, there's Philly, and I guess there's other parts. But I want to talk about the role of the governor in places like Pennsylvania. We have two big metro areas, and then you've got a lot of else. You got a lot of work to do. Lauren, you are here answering totally for the federal government. No, I'm just, I mean, Department of Labor, because you do inside the Department of Labor, the American Job Centers, but people also forget Job Corps, Youth Build, seasonal and migrant farm workers, Native American programs. Career development is critical to the work that happens. What do you see as the role of the department? You guys have been very active. You're muted. Sorry.
I absolutely agree with the other panelists and everything they said. So I could just say, yeah, what they said. But I am going to say, I think that the role of the federal government is to support, assist, believe it or not, break down some of those silos and barriers. I think when people think federal government, you don't think about it as a place where silos and barriers and things are broken down. But I absolutely think that that's a role that we can play and that we do play in some instances, where we can provide technical assistance, connect states with other states, connect local areas with other areas, provide them guidance on how to implement policies. So, I do think there's some role that the federal government should play and can play in making things easier for states and local areas to learn about other best practices and kind of provide an opportunity to share information at all levels. So I do believe that's a role that we play. The example that I can give is with WIOA, right? We've spent, since 2014, we've spent quite a bit of time and resources just trying to provide the technical assistance to all levels of government to implement the change that happened with WIOA. And so I think that that's absolutely a role that the federal government should play, and that's to support and to help and provide resources. As far as the state and local levels of government, again, I would only say, reiterate what was said before, that they should engage, they should communicate, they should share what their needs are, so that we can properly provide the support and the technical assistance that helps to break down maybe challenges and silos and barriers. And I think that maybe is the only thing that I feel is different than what was said earlier.
So these cross-departmental conversations, Lauren, I'm going to ask you the rhetorical question. There are conversations, a lot of conversation with the Department of Education,
Yes.
and you all in workforce investment. But let me come back and talk about, you mentioned, and I will, I will say, we always point out what we wish was better, but ONET is the world standard. As I talk to my colleagues around the globe, ONET is something that everybody understands. We all talk about ONET. But let me ask you, the department's been very active. We talked about the technology that you're bringing. What's the thought process around touching on career development? What's the thought process around what drives the technology development in the department?
We have an innovation officer, and I think that, the idea about, I'm not sure that our department or where we are in ETA, that we have necessarily all the expertise that we need to keep up with the pace of technological advances, right? So when you talk about ONET, we've been doing things the same for a pretty good period of time. And we always like to look at how we can improve the data collection, make it more nimble, make it more responsive to the pace of the industries. And that's difficult with the bureaucracy that supports data collection. So I think, some of the drivers that we consider, not only with ONET, but with Career One Stop too, is looking for a way that we can, partner with, private sector to look at how we might, improve and stay in pace with the technology and the growth. And an example of that is Career One Stop, is partnering with Google in some cases on certain projects. ONET, of course, has a data collection process, but they've also looked at ways by partnering with Burning Glass to make things a little more responsive to industry change. So by using real-time labor market information to enhance the data in ONET, that's something that we've done over the years. So we do definitely consider this private and public partnership as an important tool in trying to keep up with the pace of technology. Other things that we've discussed, artificial intelligence, working with, again, organizations that can help us to implement, some baby steps, I would say, and trying to make that happen. One of the things about both of our tools, ONET and Career One Stop, is that we don't have user accounts. So we really don't have the ability to provide like an individualized experience on our tools. It's more of a grand population experience, but we're definitely, thinking about ways of implementing a more individualized experience, and that would involve using AI. So, we're doing things to make sure that we stay in pace, but it can be a little challenging, with the bureaucracy that supports electronic tools and DOL.
That's a great point, a great segue, because I want to come back and talk about what do you see as some of the struggles as we think about career development, as we think about career advising. I'm going to jump, Kim, to you and ask, Lauren identified things like, and I mean, ONET is an anchor. ONET's an anchor for so much of what we do. But what do you see as some of the struggles out of these three layers of involvement in career development?
And I think one thing that you mentioned earlier was, you and I, the work that we do of trying to build this bridge between education and labor. I mean, the Department of Education is one side of the mall, the Department of Labor is the other side of the mall. We've had presidential memos, but there's still this, if we kind of polled the whole entire federal government, we know there are training programs in almost every federal agency. There are ways to help people get to those training programs in almost every federal agency. So like we still have work to do in terms of collaboration at the federal level and collaboration at the state level. And I think the reason that that is so important to continue the efforting around that collaboration is the user experience. It's that learner, it's the worker who's trying to find things. I will give an example. My brother-in-law who started college, didn't finish, went into IT, has no industry certifications despite my prodding and prompting, but has no industry certifications. And kind of at 45 decided I don't want to do this anymore. So I tried to help him actually get logged in to register at Montgomery County Community College to say, let's talk to a career coach and help you think about how your skills can be transferred into another industry. I've been in this field, as I said, 28 years. I could not figure out how to get him an appointment with a career coach at the college. And then I was like, and English is my first language, and I am educated, right? So like we have lots of barriers we need to remove to get people access to the information in the way that they need it, where and when they need it. So I think that's a kind of significant barrier. I'm going to say kind of put it in the like struggle bucket, but I am encouraged by this. And it's something actually Lauren said is increasing kind of collaboration between government and private sector, because I think that the work to make this kind of exponentially leap forward requires that collaboration. I was just on a conversation the other day with someone who's created this platform that is aggregating non-credit courses offered by community colleges across the country. And it's kind of like an Amazon marketplace. I'm interested in something. Oh, I can get this course no matter where I live. And it's going to show me what I need and what credential options this is moving me on. Like to me, the technology interface with this is a key part of the solution of making career development accessible and current and forward-looking, but that requires that public-private collaboration. So, I mean, I think the last thing that I would just say, I actually was listening to a podcast the other day with Rich Feller, who's done a lot of work in the career development space, and he was saying the career development system, and I've not really ever heard anybody say this, yes, in CTE, we know we need to change based on the needs of industry because we're reflective, we're teaching what industry's teaching. But I've not really actually heard of anybody saying, well, career development needs to transform on that similar cycle, like every 20 years. We need to be thinking about how we're helping people think about and navigate into and through the world of work as the world of work changes. And I was like, it was just kind of this light bulb moment for me of like, well, yeah, of course, that same cycle, we need to be having the career navigation systems changing. And I don't know that I think people have viewed the systems as a little more static. So those are a few thoughts.
A couple of really good observations. Amanda, what do you see as the struggles around career development in these layers?
Yeah, I'm going to steal the term struggle bucket, and I'm going to set out some struggle buckets for you right now. A couple of them are tied to data and information. So when I'm talking to states around data collection, there's sort of a knee-jerk reaction to like put a bunch of information together and put it on a dashboard and put it out online, and then they're like, and now we've shared information with people that people can find and then use. You think, okay, well, that's not necessary. Who's using it? And inevitably, the people using it or looking at it are people like us who are like, oh, look at this cool dashboard for this state, not necessarily learners. So there's really this sort of disconnect around the idea of information and data and what that means to users and what's really like the right kind of things to put out there and how best can we have them use it, but then also data needed for policy making. It's a whole, like, it's a different sort of group of pieces of data, but I think the data conversation has to be inclusive of both. Like, what is going to be pulled out for users? What do we need to understand as helping policymakers make some of these investment and programmatic decisions? It's different pieces of the data world. And I think we can sort of either move in one or the other directions and forget the other, and have less impact with the data that we're pulling together. And also connected to that user space, counselors and advisors at K-12 and workforce agencies, and also at higher ed, we throw a lot on their plate. Like, well, we'll just have counselors tell them all about all the things that they can do. So now every counselor needs to know about all of these different career pathways and all the credentials that exist. Literally impossible at a lot of colleges or schools' current staffing rate, and how many folks that they have to actually advise people and all the things we expect them to know. We also expect these.
I think that's a great point. I don't mean to interrupt, Amanda, but I think it does get back to my question earlier. I don't know about the 50 states, but in the Commonwealth, the state is supposed to provide a certain level of funding across the board to local school districts, and there are 501, I believe, in the Commonwealth. Kim's nodding. I think that's right. We're second only to like Illinois, maybe, or something. But so how does the state deal with these issues of quality, this issue of what you're saying to a career guidance counselor, the numbers they have? I saw a few years ago the ratio in Philly, which was like crazy. It was like 600 to 1. So what's the role of the state in trying to look at looking at this, not trying, but looking at this issue? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, I think there has to be a realistic conversation about all the things we're expecting of the folks who take on these roles. They're also expected to help with assessment testing and mental health counseling and basic needs referrals, and all that we're expecting them to be career and life advisors and essentially social workers at the same time. So much is put onto this this group of folks within our different systems. I would say advisors and counselors within these different systems, we're all not investing in them enough. And there is evidence out there, when you invest in more advisors, you get better outcomes for the things you're trying to do, because you have more touch points for those students who need support or would benefit from this type of guidance. So, I can make these blanket statements, but there needs to be more investment in advisors and counselors at all of these points, so that there's informed professionals who are learning, or who are doing that learning and that developing that Kim mentioned around, career development. They're able to adapt and change and learn about the data that's out there, so that they can help learners curate that for themselves. So they can help give them the agency to figure out what's next. But if we don't have enough of those folks, then that information sits out there, and learners who could be benefiting from it don't make that connection. So I think oftentimes states put their investment into these tools, which many of them are cool and super interesting and usable and have great information, but the disconnect between the learners who need to use these and those tools is one that I think has to be bridged by these professionals who live in this counseling and advising space. So they're a critical connection piece that I think many times does not get enough recognition or investment within the career development conversation.
Ron, can I pick up on that? Because I want to say, if the solution was have a robust technology platform and require high school graduation plans, we wouldn't have a problem anymore, because everybody's done that a bazillion times. But I think we have seen some states trying to recognizing the value of that counselor. And while we certainly would be advocates for more school counselors, I do think there are some innovations that are happening in states that are investing in career navigators and career coaches, that we're seeing collaboration between secondary and post-secondary systems that are using kind of people in the advisement personnel space to support learners. We even see in CTE, and so the challenge is, if you can get into CTE, your instructor in CTE essentially becomes your guide, right? The problem is the gateway to get into CTE or not. I mean, then you stay with your CTE instructor for 2-3 years. They become a family friend and a mentor, and invested in you. But it's kind of that gatekeeper. And so I think what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people try to kind of legislate policies around this, and to support Amanda, it really is an investment issue, not just a policy solution.
So both of you are pointing out something. Lauren, I'm gonna come back to you. I saw you nodding. You actually are a counselor. You actually do this. Is there a need for us at the federal level to do a better job of, I don't know whether you want to call it professional development, or more time connecting to the people who actually sit at that desk? Let's pretend we're all at desks. Sit at that desk to do the counseling. How do you bridge that gap? Because you are producing some technology tools, to Amanda's point. You are, the Department of Education is. So how do we close that gap, that knowledge gap? You're on mute.
I guess that's why I've been nodding and shaking my head. I'm like jumping out of my seat, because that's what's missing. Like, even in our electronic tools, we are missing coaches, right? So we can add all of these wonderful widgets and tools and things to ONET and to Career One Stop, but we can't replace the person. We can't replace the coach, right? That helps the user navigate not only the tools, but make it so that it's a longer term experience. So I think what's missing, and I think there's a place for us to try to figure out, how do we help, the coaching piece of it. So we have our career advisors in the American Job Center, and we provide technical assistance that supports them. And, we do webinars on how to utilize all of our tools. So, we're giving them the resources. But what is the way to encourage the coaching piece? That's huge, because it is a long-term process. It doesn't end. Like, the user will come to our site, they'll spend a little time, they may go away, a couple weeks later they may come back, but there's nothing that ties together their experiences and helps them get to an end goal. It's like we're putting that responsibility on them. And I don't think that every job seeker is able to get to that endpoint or plan a way to get to that endpoint unless that person has a coach or has an advisor. So, that's, I don't know how to, or what the solution is at the federal level. It would be one thing to say, yes, invest in more advisors and try to help that along the way, especially now, with the pandemic. We have, we're putting out grants to states. That could be one thing that we could say, is that, to hire more coaches, hire people that will, help individuals navigate their way back into the workforce. That's one way we might solve that problem, but it's a longer term issue. It's not a one-time shot. So yes, absolutely coaching. I think the other piece of it is, and this is what Janet and I were talking about earlier, before the call started. So bureaucracy hampers a lot of what we do, at the federal level, and specifically the standard occupational classification process. That's a 10-year. There's a 10-year gap before we consider new occupations and changes within industries. So I think there's definitely opportunity there at the federal level for us to, ask, why does it take 10 years? Between, times when we will recognize new occupations, that's just doesn't keep up with the pace of the change of industries. So, there's opportunity at the federal level for us to, look at coaching. Absolutely. How do we help with coaching in person and online? And then, how we can get rid of some of these the bureaucratic barriers that make things difficult.
I know you can't say it, Lauren, but I'm allowed to say that I think this is where having a conversation with your congressional legislative delegation is really important, to help them understand that there is this gap and they have a real opportunity to help close that gap, whether it's in WIOA, whether it's in Perkins, whether it's in ESSA, whether it's in HEA, they have an opportunity, but first they have to understand that that gap is there. I think really part of also what we need are real tech wizards like me and Jan Bray, spending more time out there coaching the system. I want to come back and
that'll screw up the system big time. We don't have to worry about anything then.
You all don't get to see Jan and I on our staff calls, but it can be interesting at moments. Hey, I do want to come back and I want to ask. I'm going to start off, Amanda. I'm going to ask you. And I joked about Sam earlier, but we should all live so long that we would have incredible partners like Snap-on, businesses that not only talk about these issues but walk the talk, commit themselves, commit their organizations to advancing career development and workforce development. But Amanda, what can business do? I'm the governor. What is it you're going to suggest to me I ask of business in this regard?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of work actually that's happened with governors around engaging industry. First of all, we have some, the high profile conversations like in Washington with their tech partners and Arkansas with Walmart. We have these big employers who come to the table and model industry collaborations. But I'm always there to say, this is great, and this can really bring some focus to a topic. But the heart and soul of a lot of this career development stuff is at the regional level. It's with our small and medium-sized employers. It's with things that are driving our regional economies. So governors certainly should set the table for clear opportunities for public-private partnerships at the regional level to advance this work. But also some of these concrete investments that have been made. Work-based learning is a huge push for governors across, a couple, like 30 states I know have like clear investments in work-based learning opportunities across the continuum, which I think is really important too. We see, of course, apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships being a big push, and it's like, let's get apprenticeships for everybody. And then we have pre-apprenticeships that are becoming sort of in vogue right now for younger populations. But then also going all the way back into the K-12 setting and thinking about just career exposure opportunities, learning about different fields, maybe doing a visit to a local employer, maybe, spending a day doing job shadowing, maybe doing an internship or a project-based opportunity with a local employer. There's a lot of really concrete ways in which employers can be connected to education and workforce opportunities. And there's a lot of desire on their part for them to engage and mentor and support young talent coming through the pipeline. It just has to be done in a coordinated way so that the same employer isn't getting, I know we hear this when we talk to regional folks all the time, like the same employer gets outreach from 5 different places to do things with the school, and they're just like, I can't do all this stuff, but they're willing to do things if we sort of come together on the state and local side and say, how are we going to engage employers? So work-based learning, I think, is a huge opportunity. There's platforms for employers to be engaged in meaningful ways for their work. But then also a lot of states are thinking about sort of, what are some, tax incentives for you taking on interns or building your apprenticeship programs, or, how can we incentivize in a really concrete, like in the most literal term of incentivize you to engage more closely with our education and training systems in ways that you can really see an immediate value add for your business. So I think the ROI conversation that we make to businesses as an easy one. We just have to get in there and make it. And I think states can play a great role in that communication. Also, I think state workforce boards have clear opportunity to sort of set the stage at the state level around how businesses are going to be engaged around sector partnerships at the state level, how we're going to talk about skills and credentials throughout our state systems around different sectors. So I think the state has some opportunities to sort of outreach and incentivize, but also to put some sort of meaningful frameworks around different sector work that's happening throughout some of our, I know CTE leaders in states are doing this in, in this great way that connects secondary and post-secondary. Workforce should also be a part of that conversation, along with adult basic education, like these places that we can connect so that we're speaking the same language around the sectors. So when we're talking to our industry partners, we're all talking about the same levers that we can pull and the same sorts of competencies that exist in these different sector training opportunities. So those are the things I would throw out. There's lots of opportunities for connection though.
Let me ask you guys, we're bumping up against time, but really quick, we all agree that we need to do a better job of helping people, not just young people, but people develop a career pathway. If you had to suggest one measure of that we're making progress, what would it be? Lauren, how do we know we're getting better?
Well, that is research, looking at, conducting more research, looking at outcomes and impact, right? That's how you're gonna know that you have, made some impact in an area. Data sharing, I think these are all good investments,
Are we going to see completion rates rise if we do a better job around career counseling? Are we going to see completion rates rise in community colleges, post-secondary, in technical education programs, if we're doing a good job of counseling?
Right, that's what I would say. It's that, and then you have to be able to measure that impact, and measuring impact takes a lot longer, right? So it's not a super responsive, you're not, you might be able to measure outcomes quickly, but the impact is what takes longer. So, but I definitely think, doing the research, understanding how to evaluate what we're doing, evaluate our programs better, and looking at the impact of things, that's how we'll know that we've, made a difference. Cool. In what we're doing.
All right, Kim, let me give you time to answer that.
Plus one on completion. I think the other thing we talked about is learners being centered. So we have an opportunity and responsibility to talk to learners and find out how they feel, some sort of like learner satisfaction measure that both of them are looking at closing gaps, so that we're making sure that we are closing gaps that exist by race, gender, and income level.
Awesome. My thanks to Lauren Fairley, Amanda Winters, and Kimberly Green for joining in the conversation. My thanks, Leo, to you and to Brian for your leadership, and to Jan and Spencer for the opportunity to spend time with you all today. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Good conversation. We need to keep it going.
I agree with your last statement, especially, Ron. We need to keep the conversation going. That was a great panel. Lauren, Kimberly, Amanda, Ron, thank you. That was really, I always feel bad when panels have to end because you really want to engage and talk more. So we'll find other ways to do it. So I really appreciate it. And as they've been talking, and we continue even from yesterday, it's about, looking at how do we build a new system? How do we get out of the boxes we were in before? And how do we create a system that is reflective and accessible to the community, to the entire community? And so definitely, as we talk about that, the issues of equity and diversity need to be highlighted, need to be discussed. They are there front and center. And we are really excited. We have a dynamic panel to address this issue, which is so critical to the whole discussion on career development. So it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this panel. We're thrilled she's here, Alexandra Oliver-Davila, who is the Executive Director of Sociedad Latina, and who's going to moderate that. And I'm going to let Alexandra introduce the panel, but I want to thank you all for being here, and I look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Alexandra Oliver-Davila. Just call me Alex. When I hear Alexandra, I always feel like I'm in trouble. So I'm really excited to be part of today and really excited to actually meet over Zoom the panelists for today. Having looked you up, you're very impressive, and I know we're going to get a lot of really great information. So we have Orrin White, who's the Director of College and Career Success from United Way, Delaware. I just want to say I'm a huge United Way fan. I'm actually a person that donates to United Way, so I encourage everybody to do so. And Janay McClarin, Engagement Manager, National Association for Partnerships in Equity, and Sharon Givens, President of National Career Development Association. So today, we are going to talk about diversity in a little bit of a different way. I know when people hear the word diversity and workplace diversity, sometimes they may cringe. It's a sensitive conversation, and usually, unfortunately, not posed in a positive one. I'm here to say that those days are over, and that really workplace diversity has to be the norm. So you're going to just have to get comfortable, and that it is what it is. It's even beyond, that it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. But it's a new paradigm when we look at how the world has changed, how, the globe has changed, how our cities have changed demographically. And, we all know that diverse teams make for better teams and lead to more successful outcomes. And the more diversity on a team, the greater chance of having different perspectives and different lived experiences that people are bringing to the table. And the more diversity on a team, the greater the creativity and ability to problem solve. And then additional benefits include increased productivity and profits. More than ever, employers are prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and investing resources into making sure that their teams are set up for success. And ultimately, this results in high impact competitive organizations, institutions, businesses with high levels of employee engagement. And according to a McKinsey report, gender diverse companies are 25% more likely to outperform their peers, while ethnically diverse businesses are 36% more likely to perform better than their competitors. And despite this documented evidence regarding the advantages of diverse workplaces, many organizations, institutions, businesses, employers all struggle to implement a successful diversity recruitment and also retention. So it's beyond recruitment, but also retention. And so we're going to talk about what can you do to improve your diversity recruitment and retention strategy. So as I said earlier, rather than focusing on why diversity and equity is important, because it is, and if you're not in that place, I strongly encourage a lot of self-reflection and a lot of reading, and happy to talk to anybody. But like I said, those days are over. We're there. It is important. It only benefits our workplace. We're going to chat with these three individuals who are going to share the positive impacts and successes that they are seeing, because they are not just talking, but also walking the talk. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves briefly and just tell us about their role in their organization, and then go right into the first question, which is in what positive ways has focusing on diversity and equity impacted the culture of your organization, your staff, your colleagues? What value is diversity bringing into your organization? Basically, how are you generating buy-in around that? So I'm going to start with Sharon Givens. Again, she is the president of the National Career Development Association. Sharon.
Yes.
Thank you for being on this panel.
So just a heartfelt thanks for having me as a part of this very important conversation. So I'm certainly excited to be here today. And I'm actually president-elect of the National Career Development Association. My actual tenure as president will begin October 1st. So I'm very excited about that. But the way our organization works, we come in as president-elect, and then president-elect, and then president. So we have a really, really rich opportunity to begin our platform and initiatives that we have in place to perform. So the National Career Development Association is actually the largest career development association in the world. So we do have a pretty large global presence. Our focus, of course, is research, professional development, publications. We try to set standards actually for practitioners who are in this field. Also credentialing, but most importantly, I would say, is advocacy. That's a major role of our association. The association is actually divided into 4 different constituency groups, and that would be counselor educators, of course, individuals who work in academia, who are teaching counseling, but more importantly, career-related courses as well. And then we have our K through 12 constituency group, which are professionals who work in some capacity in high school, middle schools, K through 12. And that's a group that I think is really important. And I just have to say, in my state, we have professionals that work in every middle, elementary, and high school, facilitating career development services. The next constituency group would be higher ed, which is our actual largest group. And these are professionals that work in primarily career centers or either doing academic advising on some level, but they're on college campuses. The last constituency group, which was the group that I was the trustee for prior to becoming president-elect, is private practitioners, business and industry, and agencies. So this group is comprised of government, individuals who are facilitating career development in federal or state government agencies, career counselors in private practice, coaches, and also human resources, folks that are working in human resources, could be doing recruitment, training, but facilitating career development at some level. We have ongoing initiatives, I have to say, that I'm most proud of to implement diversity and inclusion practices within the association. And I'm looking forward to talking more about that later. Someone said earlier in their other life, I was a counselor educator, and I returned back to practice. I actually am licensed to practice in 3 different states. I have a practice in South Carolina and North Carolina, and I actually facilitate career counseling, of course, psychotherapy, and coaching, and career assessment and testing. My areas of expertise, I would actually, probably a few areas would be integrating career development and mental health, which I think is very, very important. Of course, diversity and inclusion, and employee mental fitness. And a lot of that has come about just from people experiencing even racial trauma in the workplace, and how do they navigate that and still remain productive employees. So again, I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to contributing to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm going to ask Janay McClarin, again, Engagement Manager for National Association for Partnerships and Equity. If you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role, your organization, and also, again, back to the same question for all the panelists. If you could talk about the positive ways that focusing on diversity and equity has impacted the culture of your organization, your colleagues, staff, and what value is diversity bringing into your organization? How are you really generating that buy-in? And thank you for being with us today.
No, thank you for having me. I really am happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation and opportunity to share in this amazing experience. So the National Alliance for Partnership and Equity, NAPE for short, we are a membership consortium, and we consist of state members, local and regional organizations, as well as individuals, all with one focus in mind: increasing access for our students, speaking around equity and workforce diversity. Our line of business focus mainly on professional development, research evaluation, advocacy spaces in the area of public policy, and providing technical assistance. And so my role in all of that is I do provide professional development. I oversee our partnerships, external partnerships more specifically. And then I am the point person for our national summit, which we just completed last month. And it was really exciting to see so many people who are ready to have the most important conversation around equity. To your question, I think when we think about why equity is important, especially for an organization like NAPE, where it's in our name, it would behoove us to make sure that it is what we live and breathe and not just the title that's on our name badges. But I think for us, it creates this idea of a holistic engagement. A lot of times when we are working in spaces, we tend to work in silos. We don't get to know the people that we work with, so we don't truly understand what value they bring to the table and to the conversation. And I think one thing that COVID and the whole work from home has taught us as we sit in our Zoom offices, that we start to see our colleagues in a different light. We start to see when the kids interrupt the catwalk across the screen. My mother, perfect example, just came in and asked me was I on camera, and I couldn't turn my head to say, yes, I was on camera. But we all present a professional us, and we present a personal us, and rarely do those worlds intersect. And so because we are working from home, because we are now in other people's living rooms, bedrooms, garages, wherever you're relegated to have your Zoom offices, we're starting to see people as people and not just commodities within an organization. So the value of that diversity and understanding the different cultural ramifications that people deal with on a day-to-day basis, but also how those various cultural pieces build who they are and how those pieces can contribute to the business models that you are creating, especially for us because we do so much training outside of NAPE. We're a really small organization and we were already virtual to begin with. And so we do have the luxury, and I call it a luxury, to go out and meet other people who are wanting to learn more about equity. So we get to see people in the learning space. And so this is very exciting when people want to take equity to the next level, to want to have conversations around diversity, to want to move the needle beyond the surface diversity that we have seen so often. And so I do feel that the value add is just the humanness of diversity that it brings to the workplace, to the conversation, because when we can see each other as people and start to relate and pull back those many, many layers of the different aspects that make up our own individual cultures, it creates a more dynamic working experience. So thank you again for allowing me to be in this space with you today.
No, thank you so much. And I had my daughter in here, if you probably saw me trying to, so I get it. I had to rush and pick her up from school. I understand, but I think you make such a valid point. I think so many people dislike Zoom, but I do think there are some silver linings from, Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever you're using, which is that intimacy that has been created and I think allowed for more learning. And that is a great thing. Sounds like you and Sharon are doing some really exciting work. And so I'd like to introduce Orrin White, Director of College and Career Success, United Way, Delaware, and ask you the same question, Orrin, in what positive ways has focusing on diversity and equity impacted the culture of your organization, your colleagues, your staff, and what value is diversity bringing into your organization, and how are you creating buy-in? And thank you for being on this panel.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the kind introduction. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. First, let me begin with extending thanks and gratitude to Dr. Solberg, Janet Bray, Robin, Spencer Murray, and the entire planning team for their flawless execution of the National Career Development Virtual Conference. I really hope everyone is enjoying the learning and sharing that has taken place over these past few days. And to your point, Alex, I would be remiss if I did not call out and name the work that we all collectively have ahead of us, and that is focused on equity and also on access. To be blunt, at the United Way of Delaware, we believe far too many of our Black and brown students and families live in poverty and simply exist in crisis on a daily basis. And this has been made more difficult, this has been made more difficult by the pandemic known as COVID-19. I am pleased to be joined by my colleagues on this panel in discussing the critical strategies and evidence-based best practices that will ultimately meet the needs of children from diverse and underserved backgrounds across the country. To talk a little bit about who I am, my name is Dr. Orrin White, and I serve as the Director of College and Career Success at the United Way of Delaware. I am a national and regional youth development expert, facilitator, and also a consultant. To talk a little bit about the work of United Way of Delaware, at its core, our mission is to maximize the community's resources to improve the quality of life. And our vision is advancing the common good by creating opportunities for all. Simply put, our why is that we believe that social change and outcomes matter. Again, we believe that too many children live in poverty and too many families exist in crisis. United Way of Delaware uniquely amplifies individual, corporate, and partner resources that drive social change through collective impact. This collective impact model dramatically changes the trajectory of our state and also our future. We believe that this can be accomplished through a holistic approach through a community continuum strategy, focusing on communities of greatest need, which we identify throughout our state as our promise communities. It represents 8 areas throughout the state of Delaware and 17 zip codes. From a database perspective, there's a little over 900,000 Delawareans that call Delaware home, and over 300,000 Delawareans call one of these promise communities home. And these have been earmarked as the areas of highest need that are most impoverished or have lacked to those resources. Our home program areas are consistent around closing student opportunity gaps, college and career success, financial stability, and empowerment. And we are driving this through investments, programs and advocacy that is aligned through diverse partnerships. Now, to focus a bit on your question, Alex, we believe that equity is not the same as equality. We are really focused on making sure that all students, and an emphasis on all, have equal access to a high quality education is indeed the goal. But the truth remains that some students need more assistance to access that education. Given students who come to school lagging academically because of factors outside of that school's control, the exact same resources as that students who are on target will not close the achievement gap. School districts will need to be ready to provide these vulnerable students more than other students and bravely defend those choices to do so. Essentially, when we focus on our work, United Way of Delaware is not a direct service organization. So as I sit before you today, I am really representing the incredible work of over 200 plus community-based organizations who are working on the front line to ensure the success of our young people. And the critical questions that we're asking is, how do we connect and interconnect? Not an us and a them, but truly a desire to break down silos in favor of partnerships that truly benefit the outcomes of all youth. We all have important qualities that support positive youth development and build youth success. And the question that we've been consistently asking ourselves is, how do we bring those pieces together?
Thank you so much. And you did such a great introduction, which I should have done. Thank you, everybody. That was really great. I was looking for my headphones and I was a little bit lost. So thank you. And apologies that I didn't call you doctor. You earned that. That's a big deal.
Not a problem, Alex.
So no, it's a big, big deal. And it leads to what you were talking about, that unfortunately, when we look across sectors, when we look in education, healthcare, philanthropy, we do not see diversity in the boardrooms. We do not see diversity in management. And, you are an unfortunate walking statistic of being a doctor. Myself, having a master's, hopefully we'll have my doctorate in a few years. But these are like realities. And I think you said so well when you talked about COVID. And I think for many people of color, it was not a surprise when we saw the disparities that COVID highlighted. And we knew that they were already there. And when we look at, who was hit hardest, we look at employment rates, we look at, deaths, illness, and we look at, loss of employment or employment hours, the digital divide, et cetera. And we know that that we have larger, broader issues, which I think is what this conversation, why it's even more urgent, that we really think about how we create, diverse workplaces, how we create those pathways for young people, as you were talking about. And so my next question, I'm going to go back to Sharon to ask about in the work that you do. It seems like you are working in a lot of different spaces, but across those spaces that you're working in, can you talk a little bit about what are some big takeaways or learnings from focusing on diversity and equity, and what are your diversity and inclusion best practices? And if you could share some success stories. So I think oftentimes, unfortunately, it's looked at like an HR thing, very, very shallow. So if you could talk a little bit from your perspective of working, sure, as you described, what are those best practices? And if you could share some success.
Sure. So kind of just picking up maybe from the first question, when I think about it in context of the association, just embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that's really powerful for our brand identity, for us to be seen as an association, an organization that embraces. And not only just looking at diversity, I think one of the mistakes that are made is looking at diversity, looking at equity, looking at inclusion, and looking at those separately versus integrating all three. Because even if you have a diverse staff or diverse group, but inclusion is not involved or the equity piece is not involved, then there's still an issue. So I think what's really critical is looking at how do we integrate, embrace all three. And when I think about just one example with the association, we have one of our strongest committees, I would say, is the Diversity and Inclusion Committee within our association. And they work primarily to create, of course, it's a dedicated group to create pathways for, number one, engagement, because we look at the numbers, we have diverse people within the association, but are they engaged? Do they feel like they have the permission to serve? And that's very powerful. I'm here at the table, but do I have the permission to contribute? Do I feel welcome to contribute my skills or talents within this space? And I think that's very powerful. One of the other things that we did, and really the response was amazing, because we did a survey, we reviewed our membership, and we looked at the person that wasn't at the table, the person that wasn't a member of the association. How many Black male counselors did we have? So we offered, which was one of the things through the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, a breakfast, and invited these people. It was their responsibility to go and recruit and say, we have you here. What do you need? How do we get you involved? We know how many students of colors, how many clients of colors that actually need assistance, but we don't have you at the table. So that was one of the major efforts that we did. The other thing that we're doing that should be ready and available next year is we're now updating our career development competencies for counselors, which is very critical. It's important for folks in this field to have standards. And we feel like, as a part of the association, it's our obligation to prepare our providers and practitioners to actually be equipped to work with diverse groups.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I think you make such a great point. I can't underscore enough, which is, as a person of color leading an organization, whether you are an organization that is led by a person of color or an organization that is all, people of color, I think it's still a conversation, right? It's still a journey. And you can't take for granted that just because you have people of color sitting around the table, it is so important to be inclusive and to really look at it as a journey. And I think so true, like who is missing, at the table, and then all of the different things that come. Even I think of myself, like in my organization, we focus working with Latino youth, and when people think of Latinos, they think, oh, it's just one culture, and it's really not. And there's a lot of nuances, a lot of different stereotypes, and so making sure to have the space to have those conversations. So true. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm gonna now turn to Janay, and same question. If you could talk about the big takeaways or learnings from focusing on diversity and equity, and if you could talk about some of the best practices and share a few success stories with us.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think about a lot is when we started thinking about COVID and the racial disparities happened this past year that we all watched, and our focus was because we were all at home. And I often think if we had been in our normal workspaces, would we have paid that much attention to it? And so because we were in essence homebound, we had to really take stock in what was going on. We could no longer pass the buck and say, that's not happening in my neck of the woods. That's not happening in the spaces that I work and breathe. But in doing that, we have to be careful to not regulate diversity, equity, inclusion, access to one person or to one department. The equity officer can't be your equity plan. The diversity council can't be your equity plan. It has to start top down. There has to be tremendous buy-in from leadership. And I think what we've seen in organizations we work with, but also what we've seen at NAPE, because a lot of times people think, oh, because you have it in your title and you do it, that you don't ever slip, but we slip. And so specifically when the Black Lives Matter was happening and the statement was being drafted, a lot of heated conversations happened because people were speaking from lived experiences. And at that point, it was clear to us that we hadn't done our own work in some ways, that we were so busy doing the work for others that we hadn't taken the time to do some self-inventory, because again, we regulated those conversations to certain people in the organization. And so one takeaway from me is that you have to look at equity as a plan that includes everybody and not just the one person. And typically that one person is a person of color. And so that in some ways tokenizes them, but it also puts a lot of pressure on that person to be the end all be all for everybody in the organization. That can't be the person who you put out front when it's time to make the statement. That can't be the person that you go to say, okay, this is a problem, how do we do that? Or when you have a training, make sure you have one person of color who can speak to that audience. It's really important that it's a cross collaboration across all departments and that it's everybody's responsibility. And in doing that, one of the other things that we focused on as we were doing trainings was people would come to the trainings, they would come to the technical assistance and be really excited. And then we would follow back up and just to check and see how things were going, and nothing had happened. And what we saw was leadership, the policymakers, the folks who write the checks were not at the table. They were sitting representatives because that made them look as if they were doing the work. And by no means is that a dig to anyone. It's just simply what we figured out was that you have to engage the decision makers if you want to get it done. It does me no good at all to train your staff if upper management administration is not going to be a part of that conversation, because the staff can only do so much. So we created an Equity Leadership Institute and really encouraged leaders to come so they could sit and soak what we were saying. And then we made it where it wasn't a magic bullet or here's what you have to do. If you go back and do these 5 things, then you'll be equitable and everyone will be great. Like, it really was about doing the work. And so that was one thing that we really focused on, and seeing the success and the response of having people sign up for that Leadership Institute. And then the other piece that was near and dear to me, I've been doing a lot of work in the spaces of apprenticeship and workforce and working with youth. And one of the things that we've been focused a lot on is the importance of youth voice. I always find it a tremendous disservice that we're going to serve a community, but we don't invite that community to the table. To Sharon's point, you know, we say, come and join us, but we never mic them up. We never say, what do you think? So we tell them what they think. We tell them what they need, and then we're surprised when it doesn't work. So we invited a leadership group this summer, and we required that they had a member of the youth community, a student had to be a part of the leadership group. And we also paid that student, because that was the other piece of it, that a lot of times when students are involved, we want to use their experience and their expertise, but we don't compensate them properly. And so it was really important for us that we gave students a voice, that we made them feel a part of this opportunity. And the return on investment was huge. They spoke at our conference. It was one of the most attended sessions. It was very raw and real to hear a student tell a bunch of administrators, what you're doing does not work for me. And if you want me to be successful, then you need to hear me. So I think giving voice and speaking truth to power was really vital for us, and it was a learning experience. And we've continued to see the benefits from that piece.
Such great points. You are speaking my language. I work with young people, so I could not agree more. I think whether it's young people or families, if you are doing the work and you're saying that you're representing, policies cannot be made, programs cannot be made without those they are trying to represent, to be part of the conversation. In my own organization, similarly, we have a pipeline. We have alumni who stay with us until, some of them are even like 28, 30 years old. They're still with us. It's really wonderful, but being able to think about that as like a pipeline for our diversity. And you made another, I think, really wonderful point, which is, I think, one, this is my own pet peeve and may not be everybody's, but I think when you start looking at having a committee that's dedicated to, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, I always find that really problematic, because I think it's everybody's responsibility. It's similar to the notion that you have staff in a school that is like a family engagement person, and then they're looked at as having the complete responsibility of getting families engaged, when really it should be the custodian, the receptionist, the teacher, the principal, the lunch monitor, the bus monitor. So thank you for making those points. And I'm going to move to Orrin now and ask you the same question. Orrin, if you could talk about big takeaways or learnings from focusing on diversity and equity, and some best practices and success stories. And I think, you know, you have your United Way hat, and then you're also working with other organizations. So whichever you feel comfortable talking about, either or both, up to you.
Absolutely, Alex. And I think I'm going to dovetail with my colleagues who really talked about the role of community-based organizations, but also kind of under the umbrella of COVID-19, which has really been a focus for all of us. But specifically to speak to the members, employers of industry, we know that community-based organizations provide the best insights into the on-the-ground needs, and as well as the cultural context for clients from diverse backgrounds, leveraging their idiosyncratic trust from a long history of engagement in that community. And I think the questions that we've really asked ourselves in terms of how they advance equity is, what can community-based organizations do in this space, and what's being done well in this space? Chief amongst them is providing that additional capacity to state leaders in districts for which to support more students in expanding their career and their life goals, as well as supporting the development of critical employability skills to be successful learners and successfully matriculate into the post-secondary, into the workforce. I think if I was to frame this thought, it's that community-based organizations cannot just be a part or a thought, but they must be integrated in a thoughtfully embedded part of the solution. Across the country, we're seeing state plans for accelerating student learning, including a range of new strategies and targeted interventions. We know that states are developing multi-tiered systems of support, and they are now examining potential partnerships to address not only academic needs, but also social and emotional needs and competencies, which includes efforts to intentionally provide more learning during and after school. Simply put, employers today are looking for what they call deep human skills in the future of their workforce, but we recognize these skills as advanced social and emotional learning skills. It's about helping youth to make those important linkages between those developed skills and their talents, and helping these same young people, Black and Brown and Latinx, identify how that skill or that talent aligns to the future world of work. Alex, I would be remiss if I didn't think about reflecting to my attendance of a brown paperback session a few weeks ago, in which I had the opportunity to learn about the phenomenal work that Sociedad Latina is doing and their after-school program and their summer program in Boston to help youth really develop those skills that they need to successfully enter key high demand and high wage jobs. Sharing those best practices, hearing those terms such as ensuring those young people were confident, that they were competent, that they were proud of their culture, and really focusing on education, workforce development, civic engagement, arts and culture, but most in chief of importance, Dr. Solberg, thanking you for the invitation, is partnering with Boston University to integrate the critical STEAM curriculum and programming being funded through the National Science Foundation. So I will certainly allow you to speak more to that. But for me, in terms of talking about best practices for us, we know that COVID-19 has changed everything. And we know this full well. However, for many Delawareans who were living week to week before COVID, the cascading impact on their finances, their health, and on the education of their children has been nothing short of catastrophic. A report published by McKinsey & Company laid out the implication of education opportunity gaps with a specific focus on children of color and those who come from impoverished or underrepresented areas, who forecast to be impacted most. From a data perspective, the McKinsey & Company report forecasted that all children, regardless of their race, their color, or their creed, will be suffering from a minimum of 6 months of learning loss. But when we disaggregate that data and we begin to look at race and socioeconomics, we know that for Black and Brown students, that number jumps from 6 months to 9 months of average learning loss. But when we look at simply low-income children, that number jumped to a full calendar year of average learning loss due to the pandemic known as COVID-19. But to talk about some of those best practices, I encourage everyone that there is hope. In the middle of this pandemic, in partnership with 21 community-based organizations, the Longwood Foundation, the City of Wilmington, numerous corporate and individual donors, and most of Delaware school districts, from Brandywine School District in the north to Seaford School District in the south, United Way of Delaware acted with urgency to raise $1 million to establish or maintain 26 COVID learning pods in some of Delaware's most underrepresented communities. These professionally staffed, safety compliant learning pods now help keep more than 700 Delaware students from falling further into the academic achievement gap. But to bring up those concepts of equities for those that are familiar with learning pods, we know that a lot of this had to do with income and finances. Though from those from more affluent communities had the resources for which to bring in a singular teacher and pull together pods of young individuals as districts began to go from a hybrid to a virtual format. But again, for Black and Latinx students and students that come from more impoverished communities, that simply wasn't the case. United Way of Delaware was proud to stand with our community-based organizations to close that gap. In the COVID context, a learning pod is simply a small group of students who study together in person in a safe, supervised location outside of the classroom. But these learning pods offer so much more. They offer computer and internet access, academic coaching, homework and study assistance, nutritional meals, and most of all, for our young people, this was a safe and supervised place for children to remain focused on their school. Also critical to the success of this reimagined approach to education has been United Way establishing the Learning Pod Community of Practice, which features those same 20 community-based organizations that are now standing up over 26 Learning Pod statewide. And the goal for the community of practice was to meet weekly to share what those best practices would look like. and also to help our children and their families meet the challenges of virtual learning during a global pandemic. And to talk a little bit about the data has been absolutely encouraging. Across the Learning Pod Collaborative, we've seen 86% across the collaborative of young people attending their Learning Pod. 83% of our young people are successfully turning in their assignments. And then 94% of all of these young people were successfully participating in social and emotional learning outcomes. From an academic performance perspective, we saw 61 of those 719 students make honor roll, and over 100 students in grade K through 12 have made significant academic improvement, which means they came to the pod in danger of failing, and now they are successfully passing all of those classes. Also, what I would like to call out is the importance of equity and diversity as it relates to staff and administration that some of my colleagues has always talked about. We know that the ratios that sometimes take place in school often ostracize our Black and brown young people. Within these pods, we were able to have an average of 1 teacher to 7 students. 57% of the Learning Pod staff reside in the communities that they serve, and we know how it is important for our young people to see the individuals that are providing their instruction that look like them, that sound like them, and can assist them in that regard. And 40% of the administrators resided in the communities that they serve. So simply put, this has been a good investment in advancing equity and is also advancing diversity because there's a groundwork for success that is in place. There's an infrastructure and a coordinated inter-organizational platform that is constantly improving performance week over week for our most impoverished young people. We have a network of school districts, community organizations, and supporters that are both strong and active. And finally, the community of practice has the metrics and standards that ensure the fidelity to the curriculum that is being offered by their school district.
Orrin, I think you're my new favorite person. Thank you for coming to the Sociedad Latina conversation brown bag lunch, and thank you, Scott, for facilitating that. But are you a new dad? Was that you?
That is me.
Congratulations again. Thank you for being part of that. I think you just said so many important things. I think as we saw. As we have seen during COVID, and hopefully will continue, I think the support of community-based organizations that have the cultural and linguistic expertise and trust of the community is so important. This work cannot be done without those organizations. I know in my own organization, we were able to retain 100% of students from last year through this year, through COVID, through the virtual world, providing engagement, enrichment opportunities, academic supports. We're able to provide cash assistance. We were able to translate for families with teachers to be able to get food, to be able to help people navigate when they could collect unemployment or some of the special opportunities that came out around like rental relief. And I say that because it's really important that we value those community-based organizations because they already have that trust and because they are multilingual, multicultural, and the nonprofit sector has been hit very hard with COVID. And unfortunately, there's so much research around that there's just not enough organizations that are led by people of color, or that the management are people of color, and they don't get the same type of funding because they're, there's a lot of bias, et cetera. And, I think in Boston, I think about the work that I'm doing that is beyond the purview of the organization. Like we are doing vaccine clinics, like who knew that we'd be signing people up or like being, on the ground, getting people education and having them be less scared and helping them to get to those places and get those appointments. And if there had been more of us, then I think we'd be in a different place. Like as an example, there are more Sociedad Latinas out there. We'd be in a different place in terms of like vaccination as an example. So I think it's just so important. And what you said too around the reflection, I think many times we hear like there's not staff that have the experience, we can't find people to hire. And I think I think Janay also pointed that out. It's like our youth are sitting right here. And we should be building those pipelines within our school. And when we look at K-12, when we look at higher education, it's so important that our students actually have people that look like them teaching them. And that doesn't mean that, that we're not welcoming white teachers. That's not what I'm saying. But there is just a lot of body of research around students who, are able to see their professor, their teacher. And we have already, and that's just in the education world, but in so many places we could be creating this pipeline. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna throw this question out instead of going one by one and just ask any of you that feel comfortable answering, because I also want to see if there's any questions that that anybody has, and you could throw it in the chat. My question for any of you is, in terms of advice that you have for other organizations around how can they track their progress to know that they're headed in the right direction? And then how can they engage their employees, and most especially underrepresented populations, to gain insight into their sense of belonging and value? So I ask that because we've been so focused on, like the importance of creating that, but then you have that. So how you create like that sense of belonging, and how do you know you're headed in the right direction, and how would you, any advice you have for tracking that progress? So open up to either Sharon, Orrin, or Janay if you'd like to answer.
If you're okay, Janay, I'd like to speak to that. When I think about a holistic approach, and it sounds really simple, but not being afraid to have a conversation. I think that's where it begins. Just being willing and open to have a clear conversation. And when I reflect on my own life, I don't think anybody's ever come to me or offered just to have a conversation. How do you feel? What do you need? Throughout this process. And when I think about associations or organizations, I like to talk about the 3 P's of that, and that's people, profit, and productivity. So who's at the table? Who are the people there? And when we think about profit, not necessarily revenue, but what are you gaining? Look at what you can gain from all the diverse talents and people that you can actually bring to the table, which in turn, I think it will increase your productivity. If people feel included, accepted, that they have a voice, I think that your productivity would certainly increase. And then to look at just some specific strategies that you could implement, certainly training, even as a part of my platform, I'm going to implement training for our leaders, for myself, for the board of directors. I think it starts with the top, and we expand that to our constituents to make sure that they can have questions answered in terms of the service delivery process for the diverse groups that they are working with. Mentorship is key. I think it keeps people engaged. It says, you're wanted, I'm willing to invest in you. And I think that sustainability will be more likely with that. Also, having these soft opportunities to embrace difference. It could be lunch and learn, having a podcast, interviewing, I think would be important. And monitoring our language. Is your language inclusive? What terms are you using? Are your terms outdated? I think that's important to visit. But if I had to narrow it to one thing, it would be asking individuals, what do you need to feel comfortable? A simple question. What do you need? Because ultimately, I think our goal should be to ensure that all parties connected to our organizations, our associations, have a clear avenue to engage, and more importantly, they have an optimal experience. What is their experience like? Do we ask individuals that? What has your experience been like? What do you need from us?
You said a mouthful there. I would totally agree on the courageous point. Please go ahead, Janay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to actually segue from what Sharon said around the point of courageous conversations. I think that is definitely necessary, but one of the things that we talked about too is encouraging people to do the work. I think sometimes when we get in these spaces of equity, it's so easy to say, well, I don't feel that way, or that doesn't affect me, or I don't know because I'm not a person of color, so I can't speak to that. So I encourage people to do the homework, read, pick up an article, like really get involved in the conversation, but also have that really gut check conversation with yourself to say, how am I showing up in this space? And when I show up in that way, how does that reflect against the team that I'm a part of? But also you have to, from a leadership perspective, organizational perspective, you have to make dedicated time. Equity should never be put on your agenda as an item. If you want to have a conversation about equity, it should be a dedicated space that people cannot opt out of. Everyone needs to be present, and everyone needs to be able to participate at a level that's comfortable for them. And then finally, I think for me, this idea of when people say, oh, we need to have more of this or more of that in a space, people instantly go to a deficit mindset. And so I challenge people to go into this place of an asset mindset. It's like when you're working with students, if you tell them, oh, this is going to be so hard, this is going to be so difficult, you have to do all this work, they're going to show up already feeling deflated. So when you're saying you want to have more women, more people of color, more people with disabilities, more people of whatever cultural piece you're missing, you can't approach it from this negative thing of what am I losing? What am I giving up? When I was a law enforcement officer, I know it was like, oh, we can't say those jokes around her because she's a female and she's going to change the dynamic of the space, versus saying she could bring something different into the space that we have. So we have to think of equity not as something that we do, but a mindset that we all have to embody if we want to move the needle forward.
So true. Last words, Orrin?
Yeah, absolutely. First, Sharon and Janay, just an absolute pleasure to be on this panel with you guys. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for creating this space for me. I think I would lean on one of my heroes in the SEL space. Her name is Dina Simmons, and she always articulates that good intentions don't equal outcomes. And I think that's a very way of framing this. And when we think about the concepts of moving into diversity and equity, I believe for industry, it's important, to your point, Alex, to build both their cultural and their linguistic competencies. And this can be achieved through workshop as well as professional development so that they are ready to engage with those youth at that time frame. Dr. Solberg, I hope you don't mind. There's an important quote from your book, Making School Relevant with Individual Learning Plans, and you said it so well, and I think this would be my final comments. You said, no matter how much we as educators, community-based organizations, or even family encourage the exploration of careers, there is no greater influence than when an employer looks directly at a young person and states in no uncertain terms that they belong or that they have a future in that industry. I don't think it could be articulated any better than that, because it's absolutely the truth. It's creating those pathways and those bridges, as Jan said, between our employers and between our young people so that they can see themselves in those positions, and employers gaining the benefit from the provision of expanding opportunities, but also those creating those pathways for youth, promoting diversity and inclusion that positively impacts their overall work environments. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this afternoon.
Thank you so much. And I have to say that I can give a great example, which is when we had our end of year online celebration. Scott was there, and one of our young people is looking for a job, and Scott just typed in, hey, I can connect you. And it's so simple, but it's like creating these spaces where we're like all connected and we're connecting young people. And so my last words that I'll just say, thank you so much to Sharon, Orrin, Janay, and thank you so much for letting me also facilitate this session. Last words, you heard all the suggestions and in the chat too, this is a serious subject, but also let's not take it so serious. And for us, I think Sharon talked about courage. So we have to have courage to ask questions. I think we're unfortunately living in a time where anything you say, you feel nervous. I think we all have to be open that this is a learning journey together, and it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask about people's culture, obviously respectfully, but I think we have to have the courage, and have the courage in your own workplace. When you see that your team is not diverse and inclusive, to say that, to say, hey, you know, like who is missing here and who do we need to bring? So I will leave it at that. I think we have 2 more minutes. So if there's any burning question on the side that I may have missed. So thank you, everybody. I'll end 2 minutes early. Is that okay? Or you want me to just keep talking?
Alex, that's up to you. I think that the conversation this panel has been so interesting and insightful, and has really made, makes everybody stop and think. And to your point, it isn't just one way or the other. It can be scary, but it's also very enlightening, and I think it gives us all something to shine for and to move forward on. And so I thought that all of your comments, your insights, the experiences you've shared have been really, really great. And we thank you for that. Sharon, Janay, Orrin, Alex, a phenomenal panel. And I know that the whole area of equity and diversity has been discussed by the coalition board, and really looked at, how do we practice what we preach as well? And that's sometimes the hardest thing. We can all say it, we know it, but doing it are 2 different things. So I think this gave a lot to think about. So I appreciate you all being here and sharing, and making us all feel a little uncomfortable sometimes. And I think that's good. I think that's how we change, is to feel uncomfortable. So I thank you all for being part of this. Now, to everybody else, we're going to take a short break, a 15-minute break. I know everybody needs to get, for me, I need to get a bottle of water and, as they say, a bio break. But the next part of the conference is very important. It is really about, all right, we've heard a lot over these yesterday and today, a lot around career development, a lot of ideas that should be there. How do we gather what's happening now? How do we look at and research what needs to happen? Where are the gaps? What's working? What's not? And really help to move forward on changing this whole career development paradigm that we've been talking about, changing the system. And so Dr. Scott Solberg and his group are going to really begin to talk about the research, how do we scientifically move forward? And that's going to be a very engaging session. They really want to have the input like we had yesterday with the breakouts with policy and technology. This is all about research and the scientific journey that needs to be taken. So we're going to give you a 14-minute break. You can all stay on like you did yesterday. Leave your cameras on, turn them off, whatever you wish to do. And we will start again at 3:15. I have to remember East Coast time versus Denver time. So we'll start at 3:15, and with what we know will be an exciting conversation. So we'll see you back here in 14 minutes. Thank you, panel. You were great.
Oh, I just. You on mute? Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, no, I guess I'm not. Let's see.
You guys got all that you need?
I think so.
All right, Robin, thank you for putting so much in the chat room. Greatly appreciate it.
Orrin talks too fast. I was like hunting for things.
I know, you're good at that. I'm impressed.
I hope that was the right McKinsey report for a few of them. And Scott, I think I can see chat. Scott, you're still muted, but that's okay.
I am muted. That's probably a good thing for everyone.
It's so rare that
no, not for me. So I guess I can see the chat.
Okay.
Nope. Okay. Just checking.
Hey Scott, this is Leo. I wouldn't miss this panel for anything. But I just want to ask you though, I was very struck by that comment from the last panel from Orrin White, who I thought was very interesting, citing your book.
How about that?
I read your book very carefully. I don't remember the quote.
Oh no.
You made it a very nice one though. There's nothing more exciting for a young person, for an employer to look him directly in the eye and say, you have the skills needed to come and work in our company or something like that. Did you say that in somewhere in your book? I like it though. It's a very nice metaphor. It's a nice metaphor.
I say it a lot because it's based on a traumatic event that I had when my 3-year-old son came back from the doctor, and I said, "How's my big boy?" And he goes, I'm a big guy. And I was shocked, and you can see I'm still traumatized that this one moment, this one brief moment in his life could completely change the identity from being a big boy to a big guy. And that's my point in making that quote is it's true that even if I'm the educator, if I'm the parent, they know us. Of course we say those things, but that employer, that just, they have this power to totally transfer that identity from I can't to, oh, maybe I can, and maybe I need to think about this. So yeah, it's something I really strong. And Leo, in the book, you'll see after that quote, the different ways that I want employers to have a more intimate dialogue with our youth, not just sitting and talking not just a panel, but to really have a conversation and get to know each other. That's kind of transforming what we mean by work-based learning and career fairs and things to be much more dynamic. So yeah, it's a very important part of the process. So, and Orrin, of course, embarrassed me, and I'll get him later, but yeah, that was nice.
Thank you. I love advice on how to deal with employers. That's my field. So I'm always welcome good advice on that one. Thank you.
That's fun.
We'll give people a few more minutes.
So Sean, if you want to cite it, you're going to have to buy the book. You know, that's the carrot. I pay him a lot to be out there marketing. No, I didn't. But yeah, we can try to find that. Maybe Orrin can track down the page number and find that out. I do it because I don't even have a copy of it here, so I can't really look it up.
Brian and I like this book so much that we're going to require anybody who joins the board or the advisory committee must buy 5 copies each of your book.
Okay.
We'll allow them to join the team.
All right. Well, maybe as we get our funding, we can give them as a gift too. So we could think about that. That would be fun.
Sure.
When they show up to our conference in November, it'd be great.
We want you to get the royalties so you can afford to send that 3-year-old to college.
Oh my gosh.
Later in life.
Yeah, he's now 30 something, and he's graduating tomorrow from our tech college, where he is in the biomed field, and he's looking for that 4-year now. And I'm so excited and proud of him. It's just amazing to see, just from not sure who I want to be all the way up to, wow, that biology course, everything's different. It's just like, wow, the timing, just keep going. It's amazing.
You're saying your son has found a career pathway?
Yep, he has.
That's really exciting.
He's gone through the 2-year, and now he's looking at the 4-year. And we did a lot of work on these different STEM fields and biotech and that whole thing. It's great. Fantastic.
I'm glad. If he'd been a high school dropout or something, it would not have been a very good commentary on practicing what you
He's in a
preach.
hot market too, Scott. That's a great
Oh my
career path.
gosh.
Our daughter's a biomed engineer,
Yeah.
senior engineer for Baxter, and it's been extremely rewarding for her.
Fantastic.
She has a patent, well, the company does, but she created it. So yeah, right out of college, she creates patented,
Believe it or not, with Snap-on's name on it. That's what's so
really?
cool about it. Yes, that is so cool.
That is good. That
couldn't have anything to do with connections.
No, actually it didn't. Don't ask me about biomedical engineering, Robin.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're about ready then?
Trust me, Robin, his daughter takes after her mother.
I am ready whenever you are,
Right.
Scott. We hope this is kind of like a fun, almost like a coffee club chat.
Yeah, well, you're getting the taste of what hopefully it's like to be on our State Leaders Network. We'll let Diana weigh in later and give us a grade. But yeah, we like to have conversation, and we're hoping to make this happen as a conversation. We certainly have some prep materials we want to give you. We want to give you an update on the work we're doing here in this space. We want to, before we get started and as we get started and when we end, we want to give our thanks and gratitude to the American Student Assistants and Gene Eddy as CEO for really believing in this project and helping to provide the foundation funding for this. I know we've got Julie Lamers on, and I think that's Kevin Fudge's phone number because he likes to use the phone in these, and that number looks quite familiar. So Kevin, I'm assuming that's you on there. And they've been a really, really powerful advocates in supporting this from ASA. And then we also have Castle that's also on board. So we have, we'll go through the names in a minute, but we've got Matt Atwell on today from some work we're doing that we'll talk about as well. But Robin, why don't we get started? You've got a fun activity.
Let's get started.
We're gonna test Jan's technical skills here and Leo's. We know we can do it. Let's take a deep breath. We can do it together.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robin Kroyer-Kubicek. I'm working with Scott right now to help him with the scientific community, and my gratitude also to ASA for providing funding for this work. He pulled me out of retirement, so I call it semi-retirement now. My husband no longer calls it my charity work. So in order to make this, of course, now it's taking time. In order to make this kind of interactive and fun, if you participated with us at the convening in December, we're going to kind of do something similar. So we have a cute couple slides that we want to try and make interactive. The thing to do is you have to either use your phone or log into another window to this Poll Everywhere site with my name in order to access the interactive slides.
Can you put that link in the chat?
Oh, sure. You're going to make me do it as I'm sitting here.
I can't find it.
I can't do it. You got to do it for me, Scott.
Oh, I can do it.
This is how we interact on these things.
I got it. I got you covered.
All right.
I got you covered.
Again, it's just a kind of a fun way so that everybody who's listening today can pop in a link or pop in a comment. Don't worry, it's all anonymous. You need to do it in this new window though. So keep that new window open because we have a couple of these throughout the presentation. Okay. So I want to give you a second to click on that Poll Everywhere. And again, remember, keep it minimized or open on your phone or whatever you're using. Should we try to the next one, Scott?
Try the next one. What? Okay, I'm trying to get in. I'm trying to get in here.
Oh, you're trying to get in. Well, we'll see if people are faster than you because first question is just, see, there's somebody from Wisconsin who's already faster than you, Scott. Colorado. So you can see where people are zooming from. This is a fun image. If you use Google Slides, it's called Poll Everywhere. It interacts right into the slideshow. So we kind of think this is a little bit fun. If you're from Canada or somewhere else, just kind of pop yourself outside the image of the US. We do have some Canadian folks who do participate in our monthly network. So this is really fun. Ooh, somebody way up in Maine, down in Florida. Oh, yay, Arizona there. So keep it open for a few more minutes. Oh, yeah, Julia in Alaska. We got Julia. Love seeing her.
Wisconsin is in the house. And so
look at Colorado, too.
Wow.
See, I handle it. It's technology, and I handled it. See,
you did it. Fantastic.
Right. So we have your seal of approval.
This is great.
Amazing. Oh, thank you, Julia. I appreciate that. Yeah, choosing Chrome does help.
A little bit going on in Florida. That's great.
Yeah.
We got some there.
Got another one. So ready for the next one?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So now we know where you're calling or zooming in from. Now just click on or select A, B, C, D, E, or F for who you represent. So if you're from an employer, a business industry, workforce development, higher ed, so Bryan Albrecht, you're clicking that B. If Karen's still on, she's clicking K-12 for my state. And I know Amy, you're supposed to be clicking workforce development.
Oh no, we're getting some none of the above that's giving us an F. So those none of the above, so get in the chat and tell us how we missed you, what you're representing. That would be great.
I wonder if they're national. Well, if you're a national organization or foundation, that would be E. So
government. Shelley,
government. How could I forget government?
I'm telling you, Robin, we got to work on this.
I know.
No.
I'm a work in progress. I'm on my 6th career pathway.
All right. Well, that's good.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get started.
Yep. And Sarah's saying covering 2 areas, so it's hard to find one. So that's great.
That's
all right,
true.
let's go. Next slide. Then.
All righty. There you go, Scott. I'm going to let you do this introduction.
So you're going to be here. We're going to show you the scope of the people that we brought together. When we first started and had a chat with our state leaders back in December, we were just at the idea phase, and now we have a structure in place. The goal for the primary goal of our work is going to create an annual condition of career readiness report. But our mission, if you will, is to identify, especially among all the great organizations that are working with us, what are the promising practices that need to be thought about so we don't have to reinvent any wheels. So we want to call out, study, and communicate out some of the great work that's going on around our country in relation to career development and workforce development and all of the different things that go with that. So that's who we are and kind of how we're positioning ourselves as we work. And then Robin.
All righty. Well, again, I'm helping with Scott to do some of this work and helping coordinate both with the research projects that we're going to start and describe in a little bit and with the State Leaders of Career Development Network. So we're really hoping to grow that and reach deeper into all of the states to ensure that they know that they have a place to discuss these issues where they may feel like they've been on their own.
All right. So our committee members, and we have some of them with us today. I saw Sheila on today. I think Kevin is in there on the phone. Orrin White, you got to hear from today earlier. He's part of our crew. An amazing group that cover a number of different areas that are just helping us think through reviewing the kinds of our outline and kind of scope of work that we're trying to do. And so really excited to have them on board. And that group will continue to grow. We're collecting a few others as we move along.
And then the next slide talks about our staff.
All right, so there you are. Robin, why don't you walk a little bit through that, and then I'll finish
Scott,
off.
of course, is our Vice President of Research, and I now have this fantastic title, Director of Research Initiatives. Feel very honored to have the title, really just helping to coordinate this work. And we do want to recognize the folks that are starting to undergo the research that's starting to occur, which is Rhonda Basha, which a lot of folks know from Department of Labor, is working with us. And then Hey Young Kim, are you on, Hey Young?
She is.
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
I don't know if you want to show your video and do a little wave.
Yeah, so she's Hyung is a doctoral student at Boston University and is an incredible quantitative analyst. And so we're so excited she's going to help with some of the heavy lifting on our data. So great.
And then we have some folks we pulled back in to help with some of the other research, which is Greg Curtis, originally from Wisconsin, Kay Schreiber from Arizona, and then Sheila Arredondo, which many of you might know from West Ed. And with working with us on from Castle, who's also been a tremendous support of this work, is Dana, Linda, and Roger, and then Matt Atwell supporting their work too, and of course, Kevin Punch.
Yeah, all right.
All righty. So this is my slide where I get to tell you a little bit about the State Leaders Network, if you haven't already heard about it. In the description for today's particular session, we talked about how learning about ILPs, individualized learning plans, personal career plans across the US for best practices and innovations and collaborations. And we have really been doing this since, and I'm not even sure, Scott, did I get the right year? Is it 2014 or 2015?
I think so. Yeah, it's out there somewhere. I don't like talking about years.
He started this as really a grassroots effort to bring states together to help have a conversation about these things as these policy implementations were going in, these policy statutes and laws were passing to have ILPs. Well, how do you do that? What does that look like? What are some best practices? How do you roll it out? And it's been fantastic. And we've grown to a group of almost more than 30 states with national organizations such as CASEL involved. We meet monthly and we do, I like how you described it one time, Scott. It's like a coffee chat. We come together, we share practices, we want to talk about innovations. It's not sit and get. We may do short presentations, but then when we really talk to each other, and I know from the past, being part of this since the beginning, we've also contacted other states on our own to help with support for what we're doing or ask questions or how did you overcome this issue? So it's been a fantastic networking resource. And we do have a link here, and some of our past meetings have talked about things like recently we've had sessions on LinkedIn and Microsoft, Grow with Google for industry certifications and how states are doing some quality evaluations, especially with their new quality industry guidelines that came out. So talking about how those are working. We've had international presentations, such as a group from Romania that Scott knows, that presented what they're doing with SEL, social emotional learning. And then of course, a large chunk of what we talk about is what's going on in states for ILP standards, implementations, and again, best practices. And anything else you wanted to add, Scott?
No, I wanted another shout out. We have a number of our state leaders that are on it here today and really appreciate working with you all and the great feedback we get. And also I want to just give a shout out to the coalition board. So many of you have been kind of coming to some of these sessions and meetings, and it means a lot to have your involvement with this. So really, really thank you for that as well. It's a really, really exciting resource for us all.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do next is just talk about the agenda for the research that under the coalition. And again, like Scott said in the beginning, our two tasks were to create this annual condition of career readiness report, which we're starting to work on now, that will be released next spring. And then really to study and identify pieces of the impact on career readiness. And I'm going to let Scott talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we're going to go through, I think we have some slides on the elements of the report, correct?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So so basically what we want to do is maintain the evidence base so that behind everything, and we had a great panel this morning, hearing from Kimberly Green and Amanda, and I forgot who else was on. We had, and Lauren, about really key issues. And underneath that is a lot of evidence base to support it. And that's where we see our role, is making sure that we can support that evidence base and talk about it in a way that we can feel strong that we are on the right track. And so so the condition of career readiness report, we meaning really Robin, has put together a fantastic model of data to really answer issues about equity, answer issues about how the personalized career plans, how the career and technical education as the primary drivers are facilitating career readiness, and looking at it at the national level so we can see how states might be doing around that topic. And with Ha-Young Kim helping us, we really want to see what critical elements are going on that may be better drivers or more effective drivers. We know, for example, Colorado's invested tremendously in bringing down the ratio of counselors to students. And they've been using those new counselors to engage in the personalized career and academic plans. And they have billions of dollars that they've estimated in revenue that's come from that. So we want to highlight those kinds of things and see how well those are serving as levers as we see some of this. So what we are not doing is collecting data. What we are doing is gathering data that's been already collected. And they've been collected in different pockets from different organizations, from our federal government to the American School Counseling Association, AdvanceCTE, all of these things. And then what we're doing is synthesizing that into data that we can then analyze to say what seems to be most predictive of something, and bring in some best practices to think about what can we do next. How can we support states in thinking about how they can more effectively manage as well as measure this thing called career readiness. So this is our first one. We will plan to have it. I think we have timing. Do we have a timeline in the next slide? We can get to that in a second. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll talk about that in a second. But so that's the big thing. We are also working on these different 5 pillars around the work is organized, that we're organized around, right, in our white paper. So we'll be looking at research that's going on in some of these areas, trying to find, I know Leo, as anyone who's been on some of these meetings knows, Leo really wants to look at those certified career counselors and make sure that they're value added. And so we're working on some proposals to fund on that. You heard Orrin and Alex representing Sociedad Latina, some really great work about what happens when a community-based organization gets involved with schools. And then Orrin in Delaware is one of our next case studies, what they're doing in Delaware, in Kansas and in Wisconsin are some really powerful models that we want to get inside and look at and analyze and then report out. So we'll be focusing a lot on what's happening in those 3 states in our first report, and that helps us understand a lot of these additional pillars. So we'll keep going on that. And then we got to move because we need to get to the dialogue conversation.
Absolutely. So yeah, just the idea that there's a lot of research going on, and it will
continue to inform our work. Yep. We got the next one. Is it working?
Not yet. There we go. So okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you know, we've had the convening. There's a lot of research, a lot to do. We did come out with a draft model to help direct some of the things we want to do. We have a scientific committee that's helping us annually to review what we've looked at, including data indicators, some of those outcomes that you guys have been talking about throughout these last 2 days. And we've decided to organize our first report under 3 strands, which Scott just mentioned. A case study about social emotional learning and career workforce readiness. Data indicators that we're collecting and pulling from all sorts of different sources. And then of course, updating the scan of what is out there for ILP PCP's personal career plans, current legislation and what's being mandated, so on. So we're underway with this, and we have some upcoming work happening in this summer. We're going to be starting underway with the really hard data collection, data tables, case studies, the roll up your sleeves kind of stuff. We'll be working with states and summarizing the data that we collected to find out some more of that. And then of course, publishing our first career readiness report. And like Scott, I'm just flipping through these couple slides because I want to get to the chatting part. So if you've never used Jamboard, it's really a fun tool, and Scott's going to put the link into the chat box.
Yeah, as soon as I find it, here it is.
Now I sent it to you. It's in the chat.
I got it.
So Jamboard was a fun thing that I discovered at AdvanceCTE in their recent spring meeting. Thank you, AdvanceCTE. I had a lot of fun with it, but I didn't know how to use it exactly. So as you open Jamboard on that link, on the left nav bar is a thing that looks like a little Post-it note. That's what you click on to fill in your comments, like seriously a Post-it note. So those of us in education used to do gallery walks and such. That's kind of similar to what you're doing. On the top nav bar, you'll see where it says, looks like arrows with pages. So the first 2 pages are going to be one question, and the second 2 pages are another question, but that's how you get to the different questions. So let's take a look at the open discussion questions. So hopefully you've now clicked on Jamboard, and you'll see the 3 rows. Remember, page 1 and board 1 and board 2 are the first question, and board 3 and board 4 are the second question. And I'm going to let Scott talk about what's the discussion we want to have now with these questions.
Yeah, so this is the thought. We want to have you come off mute at times and talk about some of these. So use the chat box as well. But the Jamboard will give us a chance to really see each other, writing it up. And what you'll see when you get to the Jamboard, in the middle, there's a little tiny sticky. If you go around the little toggle things, there's a thing that says sticky note, and that's what you can click on to write out your idea. But our thought is, from the position you're sitting in, is in some kind of organization of some kind. And you've got people around you that when you get done with this conference, you got to go back and explain what this all means. the question we have for you to really think about is, how can we help you with a report like this? What are the data points? What are the ways we communicate this, for dissemination? What can we do to help you make the case for the value of what we're doing? And by value of what we're doing, we're talking about personalized career plans. We're talking about access to work-based learning. We've heard today all about equity. How are we all being ready to deal with these really important conversations and finding the courage to really think about how we're creating a workforce or a work setting that's fully inclusive and fully helping everyone feel they belong? How are we if it's linking from the high school to the higher ed, if it's into getting access to certifications, whatever that role is you're in, what is it what do you feel would be most important in helping you make the case for the value of engaging in that work? Okay, so that's the idea. And we thought if you could do that, we can, we've got we're trying out this Jamboard thing and seeing how it works, but we want to see you kind of throw down the thoughts and ideas, and then we're going to have a conversation based on what happens, what your thoughts are. So Bryan Albrecht, what are you thinking? You can talk out loud with this too, but how are you doing? You got on the Jamboard? You look like you're looking at the Jamboard saying, is this written in Greek? You have to come off mute though.
Here. All right, I'm back with you.
Yeah.
So I did a sticky note. Works good. I like the system.
All right. Okay.
One of the things that I mentioned on my sticky note was reflecting on the employer panel yesterday, was the idea that if we can connect the importance of the shortage of workers to the need for career planning so that people can make informed decisions going forward. So we can make that bridge connection. I think that'll resonate, especially right now with the economy the way it is.
Fantastic. And so I think, Robin, the way I'm interpreting that, and others can jump in on it, is we need to be defining career readiness in a way that how are we helping young adults, youth, and adults understand the skills they need and help them find the pathways to develop those skills so that they're ready in their local and regional opportunities. All right, great. We got lots coming in. I'm calling Bryan out because
great way to, if you're kind of shy and you don't feel like jumping in. I love using this Post-it note thing because there's some days I'm just not camera ready and I don't feel like talking. I was just saying, I know I have some of our state leaders on who are not shy. So please feel free to jump out and tell us some of the things you're thinking.
And I like this, showing career development leads to post-secondary success. I think that is one of the things that we will be focusing a lot on, and I'll call out our colleagues in Kansas, and I think Natalie's on today. And the area there is that they're looking at adding in having a credential as I graduate from high school as one of their career readiness indicators, along with post-secondary getting in and continuing. And that helps us see sort of the outcome, if you will, that's really exciting. But then becomes the important question of how do we measure the work we're doing with the personalized career plans, with the access to work-based learning, with the early college and certifications on, how do we link that up to the kinds of success we're seeing at the post-secondary? And so we will be looking for models and examples, but also whether we find them or not, we hope to provide some ideas and recommendations about how we might do that. So, and if there's anyone who wants to make a comment on what we just said, this is now you're entering our state leaders network. Thank you, Julie. You just raise your hand and get ready to go because we want this to be a conversation.
I love that.
Really,
thank you. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it makes the board a little bit complicated. One of the thoughts that I had is just because we've been doing a lot of work recently on work-based learning and did a sort of a nationwide scan of what policies were. And what we have found as we're rolling that out is people are really looking for a couple of things. Best practices. They don't want to just highlight the problems. So make sure that we're providing actual actionable solutions. But also they in a competitive nature, they want to know sort of who's ahead of them and who's doing things really, really well. So, I think people want to be able to talk about their successes, but also really point to where others are doing things well and how do you replicate that?
Thank you, Joy. That's exactly right on target. That's sort of what we plan to do. We are not going to call out states and say, look how awful you are. We are not going to do that at all. What we want to do is focus on the positive and focus on, like you said, Julie, here's a really exciting practice that someone's doing, and it's unique enough to say it's moving us all forward in terms of our imagination. Julia, Robin and I had bets on how long it would take before we saw your hand up, and I think I won, so we're in good shape. Julia from Alaska has been on these meetings when we start at whatever time. She is there, and just a great trooper. So did I lose you, Julia? Where did you go?
No, I should still be here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, there you are.
Yeah, well,
So
also,
go ahead.
Also, including all special populations and what we're working in, and the fact that we don't always know when we have somebody in a special population in our groups or in our areas. So making sure that whatever materials, whatever work we're doing, that we are representing all areas, so that if they're real shy or quiet, that they're getting their piece out there. And I don't tend to be the shy and quiet person.
No, and I want to appreciate Shauna earlier sending me some direct messages reminding us that, and I've talked to Jan already about this. When we go forward, we will definitely be adding more around our disability space to make sure that we are focused on that full inclusion and thinking about how to help employers really design and set up their workplaces to be fully inclusive. So we definitely, thank you, want to keep that front and center. Natalie from Kansas.
Yes, Dr. Solberg. It's coincidence, but my sticky note was career development leading to an increase in post-secondary success.
See, and then I called Kansas out as being on the line for that. That's great.
So our governor has an executive order setting up an Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council. So our governor's education council has recommended market value assets or diploma plus prior to graduation. So we are looking at what are those high quality work-based learning experiences, those IRCs, and those college credits prior to graduation, and thinking about regionally, what might that look like in different regions? So yes, it's very much something we're looking at.
And Natalie, just awesome the amount of momentum you have right now going on in your state. And a lot of it's because of the great work you've done and Stacy has done. And we will be highlighting that work in our report. We're going to hope to highlight and get people pointing out that you have built some incredible resources. And I know you threw a bunch down yesterday in our meeting, but really just so excited to learn from Kansas. Fantastic.
Fantastic. I'd like to call out some of the NSFY states, the New Skills for Youth states, who worked under AdvanceCTE and CCSSO, which is the Council of Chief State School Officers, because that really brought attention to this package of career readiness through quality career advising through like an ILP process with industry certifications, work-based learning, dual college credit, and CTE pathways, and how that package really shows so much promise for just increasing student navigation and career development. So I know we have a few of those states on too. Feel free to jump off on that as well. And again, shout out to Kimberly Green from AdvanceCTE. That was such a phenomenal experience to be part of, was that grant.
Yeah. So one of the comments I'm looking at, helping teachers and administrators understand it's not everyone's job. It's not just school counselors, or it's everyone's job. It's not just school counselors. Does someone want to come off and talk about how they're doing that? I know there's a number of states, certainly Wisconsin's one of them, that have been able to be successful in making that case. So just kind of how you've done that, because we've heard that theme come up earlier today in some earlier panelists. And we've heard it in a number of panels, right? That one person's job and everyone steps away. So how is that getting done? I got Julie and Natalie, both have your hand raised, but I think that was from before. But if someone wants to raise their hand and come off mute, that would be great.
Now, you know, I'm scrolling to see if I can call on anyone now.
I know it. Who do we have?
We have lots of people. Let's see here. Oh, come on, Robin. Robin Russell from Colorado. I know you can add some really great discussion to this.
Absolutely. All right, Robin.
Okay, calling you out.
Am I showing up?
I don't know. I was going down the list.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Yes.
We got you.
Okay. Hey, everybody. In Colorado, there's a couple things that we did. First, we rolled it out badly and dumped ILP and what we call ICAP on the desks of counselors. But over time, we have spread the message that it is a team of people, that ICAP begins with counselors, folks from special ed, CTE folks, and administrators. And if that group gets together to decide what ICAP looks like locally, then that is a way to really involve all sorts of people. And of course, teachers, everybody else. So that's one thing that's going on, is the way that we promote ICAP. The other is that we have a pretty big focus on
Robin.
teachers. Yeah.
Robin, your voice is kind of going in and out. We're
shit.
kind of.
Yeah, it's because I don't have my microphone. I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now? I'll lean forward.
I think so. You'll lean forward. Okay, yeah. Put your face right on the screen. That'll work.
How's that?
There you go. Or we'll try that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go get my microphone. But essentially, the idea is that teachers in every classroom, or any adult in a student's life, can have a meaningful career conversation with a student, and that really makes a difference all the way through. So
and we heard Jill Cook talk about how ASCA, the American School Council Associations, adopted the work that Colorado started and added that in as well. So really fantastic, really great. And as Julia Renfro says, that caring, encouraging adult being such a key component to that is being huge. Sean is on. John, do you want to come off and talk about that? I think this is one of the key issues around when we think about personalized career and academic plans. It's a team sport, and the 3 team leads, right? School counseling, career and technical education, and our special education. And they're not to do it. They're the lead designers, along with those other educators, bringing in Orrin White from the United Way, bringing in the employers and such to make that happen. John, are you able to come off?
Yeah, I just had to find the right buttons.
Okay, yeah. So you're right on target, right? I mean, we have to think about the value that each of these perspectives bring to the table.
Absolutely. So I'm a transition coordinator. I'm coming from the special ed world, and I'm really trying to bring all of these people to the table. And this is really fascinating for me to hear that this is how it is being done. It kind of reaffirms that, yes, we all have these unique perspectives that can come together to make a really powerful team. And it's reaffirming that I need to continue to work on this collaboration of all of these different groups, because CTE has the career experience, special ed has the transition focus. That's what we do at the high school level, is that transition piece. And counselors kind of have the academic piece of it. And so if we bring all those 3 things together, you kind of have the base recipe for what could be a really powerful combination of things. But I agree, Karen's comment, how do you get them to do that? That is the hard part. That's where I'm struggling.
Well, all right. So let's give you some answers to that. All right. So this is how we've been trying to do this. The first is you create a professional learning community. And so Karen, when you're going to be moving in Delaware to bring the United Way in, plus the schools, when we think about doing professional development, we want them to start as a team. So we're not doing the professional development to school counselors. We're doing it to a team that has those pieces, and then we add in the community-based organization. So now we have a co-designing piece that's going on. That's step 1. Step 2, what we found is having them just sit and design isn't enough, because they still don't get it, that revert back to old practice. So what we're starting to do now and experimenting with is having them do some exciting activities, do some of these personalized career activities, so they can get a sense that it is very different. And at the end of the day, the key is, if it doesn't help my classroom work better, then as a teacher, I can't get invested in it. But what we're finding is, once they do start doing it, the classroom does improve. They find out that they do build stronger relationships, that the youth are now driving the process. So it's a matter of helping to get the adoption started with this community, and then we allow them to have these experiences. And we're seeing it right now happen in Boston. We've just done this, and they're getting connected, and these teachers are, most of them, not all, because we know anytime you do an innovation, not everyone's going to get bought in right away. But for the ones who have, they've had some really powerful conversations with you. Now, teachers are not specialists in career development, and as Karen points out, how are they supposed to know everything that's going on? And my one challenge back to our early panel with our AdvanceCTE crew and such is no one knows. It's not about helping counselors become better knowing the world of work and all the things going on. We have career information systems. You heard Ron Painter talk about ONET and its value, but you're all using online systems, and it's in those online systems that all that information is available. What we have to do is help educators say two important words, right? We get a lesson, and the lesson says, go out and find this great stuff about this really cool career that you're interested in, find this information. That's the lesson. What is it that the teacher does? They say two phrases. First, wow, that's really exciting. And the second is, what more can you tell me? In other words, get back to exploring. So all we're doing as educators is facilitating the students in finding out the information, learning about it, and coming back and reporting it. And then we have a student-led parent-teacher conference where we find out exactly what they've learned. And now we're starting to use all kinds of things, Flipgrids and PowerPoint presentations and video recordings for them to showcase what they've learned through this experience. So it becomes a student-driven piece. So, oh, and we've got student support personnel absolutely are critical to this. So thank you. We don't want to lose that. But this is the kind of the recipe is building the capacity of our organizations to experience what it's like when youth become inspired and when they start driving their own pathway. And so I'll give you some examples. I'll give you one quick one. And then Robin, you look for the next one. We got so many things on here. I've got so many stuff on here, but figure out the next one we'll go to. But let me give you one story. I've got many, but here's one. So we'll go to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, because great things happen in Sheboygan.
Oh, you take mine.
It's just a fun word to say. But anyway, so in Sheboygan, I'll take it, is this young woman who's Latinx, first generation, low income family. So all the different things we've talked about when we talk about equity, and was just doing nothing in school. Was at the bottom third, not really showing up in terms of showing up to class, but was not really performing and engaged. And then they had this experience with this thing called a health pathway, right? The health career pathway. And all of a sudden they went, wow, that hospital thing looks kind of cool. And so going to the online system, which they had available, because during the first 2 years of high school, they were learning how to do all this stuff. This individual goes in, they find out that there's all these cool certifications available, one of which was dietitian aid. So they went to their college between their sophomore and junior year, they got a dietitian aid certificate, start working in the hospital, realize there's a lot of cool things going on in the hospital. How do I continue in a pathway to be working in the hospital? Oh, I've got to do what? I got to take math, I got to take science. So they come back in fall, ready to take all the advanced courses in math and science, then continued on to the college and got 10 college credits and graduated, not at the top of the class, not even, probably right in the middle of the class. But that statement of purpose of who they are and what they want to do with their lives was so strong. And this is what we're seeing repeated all over the country. It was so strong, they were given a full scholarship to go into a nursing program. So this is transformative. I mean, this is helping facilitate. So as educators, we're not the experts. As employers, the expertise we want there, and you heard it earlier with Orrin White's, that quote, we want employers to just believe in the power of our youth and to really support them in thinking and seriously considering the kinds of opportunities that are there. But we don't need them to be experts in the career development. We just need them to be experts in human skills to help our youth feel inspired and feel that they belong somewhere. So this is the process we're looking at, and we're using the online systems as the technical assistance, but we're looking for human skills from our counselors, our teachers, our parents, and the whole community, our community organizations, to really make this happen. So I'll stop talking, otherwise I'll just keep going and
somebody else have a comment or something they'd want to share? Because again, we know that nobody has it all figured out. And that's what this report is meant to do, is to support you at a state level, regional level, local level, to provide the ammunition you need to say, this is important, we need to invest in this. How do we get you on board to do more of this? Is there other stories that, you may not have work-based learning figured out, but boy, you've got this ILP thing going on really well, or vice versa. Maybe you have a great work-based learning program and you're just trying to connect it to the other pieces. I'd love to hear it.
Well, and I want to, I want someone to raise their hand so they can come off and chat with us. And while we're waiting for that hand, Natalie, are you raising your hand to talk again, or you just have your hand stuck up there? What's going on there?
No, it must just be stuck. Sorry.
Okay,
I'll
that's
lower
okay.
it.
That's all right. I just want to make sure I don't want to lose you because I know you've got amazing things to say too. So there's a great one down here. It's a little tiny green post-it that says, help us develop metrics at the local level to determine the impact of this. The story I just gave you, there's your impact, right? So when we're trying to do something new and something innovative, it's the stories, and we want to give an opportunity for the stories. So you know what? Last night when we had the we had the training for all of these educators that are working with middle school youth that are using this, we call it MyCap in Massachusetts, My Career and Academic Plan. So they've been doing the lessons, and they put up these Post-its to say, how's the experience going, right? And we were able to hear them tell their stories, tell the things going on. We've had opportunities for students to record themselves, hey, what was this like for you? What happened? Those are the testimonials that we want to start with. We want to start with, how are you experiencing what's happening? Because the numerical data of getting to better grades and all that, we've seen the data, it'll happen. But that's not enough to help us feel inspired. So we want to collect these. And so in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, Adriana Plack did an amazing job of just having focus groups with the students, with the parents, with the teachers to say, how did it go? How did this process work? And on the basis of that, they were able to make the case for having more time in doing the personalized career plans. And it was clear everyone was getting into it. They used it. They decided to advance their advisory in a stronger way. In Milwaukee, this amazing Natalie, this amazing school counselor, who, by the way, I did train initially. Not that I gave her skills. She's amazing on her own. But anyway, I'm just glad to be connected with her. And Adriana, I actually did her as well. All right, when I was out as a professor. But what she did in Milwaukee was the same thing. And you know what? Not all the schools were bought in. Not all the schools were doing it. But in the 2 schools that she got the stories from, the superintendent felt so impassioned by it that it was mandated for the whole district. We're going all in, and we're doing more, and we're going to make this happen. So we have to show the potentiality, right, to begin with. And we have to really be willing to say, it's not about whether it's implemented everywhere perfectly. It's a matter of, where are we seeing the sparks? And then how do we communicate those sparks so others can hear about it and see the potential of what can happen? So that's what I want to say to the local level. At the state level, we've got to roll up the data, and we've got great ways. If anyone, I can't read all the things in there, but if people were saying, how do I sell the value? We have a really nice one that we built for Massachusetts that builds the case. Wisconsin has a beautiful statement on what they did and spend a lot of money on communication. And we have that. Saw fabulous report from Kansas. So you do have state model Colorado. I know I've got people who are going to write me angry letters because I'm forgetting the states that are doing great work in this. But there's just a lot of great work going on. And so you don't have to invent that language or that conversation. There's people who've done it for you, and you want to emulate that. And then at the national level,
I want to call on Bryan Albrecht to come off. Yeah. And the reason I'm calling on him is Bryan works with the schools to tell these stories, and he's just a master of communication in the region, including, Bryan, don't you still do a podcast on radio out of Racine, if I remember? It's taking very hard work to bring groups together to identify what you need to do and where the work is and prioritize it. But it's also, again, like you said, the advocacy piece. And Bryan, I hope you're still on and you're going to come off and talk a little bit about that, because I think you do such a tremendous job at all levels with the employers, the schools, the students, and the higher ed kids, adults, to make that happen and continue to bring that story and keep it at the forefront.
Well, thank you, Robin. Yeah, and I'm still on for sure, because this is an important and engaging conversation. And it's one that I think is something that never really ends. And I always try to remind myself that every time I talk to a new group of parents, it's the first time they've heard it. So there's always a new group of parents out there that need to communicate with. And that would be the same with students, or in many cases with teachers that had not been exposed to some of the opportunities that are available under the concept of pathways. And, you know, at Gateway, we're very fortunate. We serve close to 6,000 students through dual credit. So we have a really strong network of support from the college environment into the K-12 environment. And there's just a relationship to help provide resources that are going to build that pathway knowledge base for students, for teachers, for counselors, and of course for parents. But it took a long time to get to that stage, and it takes a capital investment. We had to hire new people. We had to think differently about the way that we invest in credit transfer and you know, in the big scheme of things, to tell that story to our community that we save approximately $3 million of tuition costs for parents in our community, then they can recognize that their tax investment, whether it's at the K-12 or the post-secondary level, is returning a greater value than it might be if each organization worked independently. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of the work of the CCD and this idea of how do we strengthen the development of career awareness at all levels. And I'm always reminded what Nick Pinchuk tells us to do, CEO of Snap-on, and that when you have the pulpit, you've got to tell the story, right? So if you are in a position of some level of responsibility, people will pay attention and they will listen. So as the college president, I'm able to get in front of groups that maybe others aren't able to. So I can talk about the importance of our investment and what the opportunities would lead to for young people and adults in our community. In fact, on one of the sticky sheets, I said, let's keep reminding ourselves that career development is not a process that ends at grade 12. It is a
lifelong.
It is a thought in lifelong learning, right? We are reinventing ourselves all the time. And, you know, with millions of job openings, there's going to be a lot of people that are 30 and 40 years old that are going to start thinking about how do I reinvent myself for a new pathway. So I think, there's just a lot of work to be done, but a lot of good examples too. And you're drawing that out from other states. That's what this work is all about, is sharing those practices.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
It can be hard work. I mean, I love that Shauna brought up, you know, I've got this group and I want this group. There's this other group working on other things. And I always tell, one thing we've said in the States, or said to the States, you got to remember that one of the links I shared today was the alignment between ESSA, WIOA, and Perkins. We need to be able to show that we have a lot of cross-connected outcomes that we can all share in and not remain in our silos. So helping your school district understand that this is part of continuous quality improvement as well. CTE is not an elective, it is part of it. Career development is part of it.
So Brian, stay right here. I want to give a clue to someone that I'm going to call them out in just a second. So I want them to get ready. But I love the capturing the student and parent voice, and it sounds like you've got something good going on. I'd like to talk with you in a second. So just get ready to come off mute and show your picture. So Brian, one of the things that I'm really encouraged about, and this kind of came up last in our spring convening with the state leaders, and we had Bobby Silverstein on, when he talked about, you know, we have to learn how to talk about this work so that we can be persuasive when we're talking with the policymakers and we're talking with key individuals that are in leadership roles. I know Natalie and Stacy have done obviously a tremendous job because they got the governor fully on board, right? That there's moments when this comes up, and how can we reframe and explain what we're doing within the kind of policy du jour, or the to help them spend the dollars that are in certain ways. But Brian, you've got it, and I'm thinking we need it as a coalition. That might be part of the professional development we do among ourselves, is to think about how we can learn how to have those conversations.
I mean, my first reaction would be that we can't use this as a standalone initiative or a standalone conversation. It has to be part of the thought process in everything we do. So when we're trying to establish new partnerships in our community, it's not just about the graduates of Gateway and are we placing them in the job. It's about developing that talent at the earliest level. So, you know, in our case, it's a kids lab program all the way through a middle school program, all the way through a high school articulated programs. And we already know, you know, where the class of 2040 is, right? They're in our kindergarten. So let's not think too hard about where that talent's coming from. How do we start increasing our capacity for creating that awareness and that engagement? And one of the big challenges, I think, in our schools in general is the parent involvement. And maybe we can resonate some different levels of conversation with that based on economic conditions or, you know, aspirations that they might have for their children. And how do we get them to university in a more affordable pathway? Let's draw that out and see if we can build some capacity for that. I have a simple story when I meet with the junior parents of our local schools. And I say, I'm always excited and encouraged when young people say they want to go to university, and I help encourage that, but do we understand the pathway for it? So most parents save for at least 5 or 6 years for that baccalaureate degree. That's a lot of money, right? What if you went to a 2-year college and cut that cost in half and then added 2 more years and graduated with a baccalaureate degree in 4 years with half the cost? oh, that makes sense, right? So there are different ways in which we can approach. We can look for the outcome. We can approach the outcome in many different ways. It's not one pathway to success, and people need different options because of the different circumstances that they're.
That's right. Thank you. So, so do we have someone who's willing to come off and talk about the parent and student voice and the listening tours that are going on?
Hi, Scott. This is Karen Keegan.
Hey.
So I wrote that sticky note. Is that what you want me to talk about?
Yeah. What are you doing? This sounds fabulous.
Well, we have been working with someone who is a social designer, human-centered design, and talking about, involving the people when there's a challenge for a group of people, involving them not only just to say, tell us what you think, but involving them in the solution. Right. This particular person is doing some amazing work in Manhattan with housing and discrimination. And they included people who are having those issues in the solutions and came up with things that are actually most helpful to that group of people instead of, educators or professionals always doing the decisions. So we feel very strongly that the student voice is missing from a lot of this in our work. So, I mean, this literally just came up. We've tried to get students involved in some of our conversations, and we might get 2 or 3 or a handful of parents, but it's not enough. And we don't want the schools that we're working with in this collaborative that we have to think, well, that's just that student or that's just that group of people. So we, in the last 2 days, honestly, have put together this campaign. So for the next, I say 3 weeks, we have about 6 or 7 sessions set up that we're going to blast statewide to try to get feedback on student and parent experiences with their post-secondary advisement process. What worked, what didn't work, what would they like to see? Because in order for us to move forward and try to fix things, we want to reimagine that system in our state, as you know. And we need to hear from the people who are having the experiences.
That's fantastic.
One parent told us that, she had gotten a lot of information, but all of it sounded like a foreign language. She didn't know what GPA was. She didn't know like all the terms, all the things. And so, the school says, we're giving it to them. We have these meetings, but the students and parents, we all know that there's a disconnect oftentimes. So
it's a lot of information.
Yeah. And so, but we want so we're inviting the schools that are part of this collaborative to sit in on these so they hear it directly. We don't want to just do these focus groups and then take it back to school people and say, this is what we want them to hear it. And we're actually using Jamboard, and, this is a really good technique to capture these ideas. But when we did it before, honestly, my heart sunk, watching the Post-it notes go up about asking about college and being told, they're at a VOTEC school, they don't need to go to college, and you can go to Del State and don't think about schools out of state. Like the things that the students were writing. Meanwhile, the school counselors are telling me, I'm in touch with them all the time, and they're telling me, we're doing this, we're sharing the information you send us, and where is this challenge? So we need to bring in that parent and student voice directly.
Yeah. And throughout. And so one of the great things that happened to us recently in Boston is we were rolling out lessons, and they had this great team of students that were overseeing the new transformative SEL activity that included the career planning. And the students looked at the lessons and gave us their report. And so then the design for the new lessons has their voice. These are the things that we think will be more engaging, more interesting, what we're looking for. It's fantastic. So I think we have to be looking at multiple ways as well. Not only, as a needs assessment for sure, and as we go to design programs, they need to also be at the table so that they can help us making sure that we're providing the best resources that we can.
I think the most important thing, though, I just want to say is that their lived experience makes them experts. It's not only the people with the PhDs in the room or 30 years of teaching experience. It's their lived experience, which doesn't usually count for much, and it really needs to.
It does. That's so awesome. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. That's great. And then I see this need to address gatekeepers in schools. Certain opportunities are available to certain students. That's a low. Is that yours too?
Sorry. Yeah.
That's awesome, Karen. So
Because
you and I, we're just going to talk.
hear-
It's just you and I. We're just going to hang out for a while. This is
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
We know
That's
that
great.
happens. We hear that from students all the time, like they didn't find out about something, but when they go to their community org, then they're learning about the process. They're learning about opportunities, but their person at school didn't tell them, but they told other kids.
I had a great experience with my own daughter with that. And, you talk about experiences and how you hear about them that, and it isn't always through the counselor, and there's a lot of information to share. So I'm not trying to badmouth counselors. They're handling so much information. It's hard to get out. What does that student need at that point in time? Amy Phillips is from Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development and runs the youth apprenticeship program in the state. And she has an example too, Amy, if you can take yourself off of this, because she was sharing it with me offline about the story. Again, another story where this kid found out about opportunities, but not through regular channels. Amy, are you on?
She's looking for the unmute button.
Aren't we all?
No, I'm not seeing. Amy, no? Well, oops. What I wanted to do was also shift that question or that point you made, Karen, to also make it a larger piece. So we also have ways in which we organize our schools. And last night, our student services director just did a bombshell game changer where he's no longer going to put our students with disabilities in programs. They're going to provide supports, and that's it. We're going to provide supports. We're not going to call them, oh, this is this student or this is this program. It's just what supports does that student need in order to be successful. We're not going to wait 45 days to decide whether or not the student deserves on an IEP. We're going to start intervening right away when you think there's an issue, so we can figure out what best supports are needed to make sure every child learns. So there's one avenue of where there's a gatekeeper. There's a math gatekeeper too, and I know Amy, maybe we'll try to get your unmute thing working in just a second.
I'm working on it.
Okay, great. The other is this child. The other gatekeeper is algebra. It is, and it doesn't matter if they pass algebra. If they can't pass the OccuPlacer, they're not going anywhere, right? So there was a story in Singapore about this young man who couldn't do algebra, and I've got a son right now who struggles with some of the basic math areas. It has a similar kind of story emerging. But what he did when he was in the lower schools, in lower post-secondary thing, he's on the lowest rung in Singapore, you have to test out to get up, was he was doing these little cyber things where he was creating graphics and then sending them to a friend, and when his friend would open the graphic, the phone would crash. Really fun stuff that they did to each other. And his teacher looked over and said, if you take that graphic and you put it on eBay, you could probably sell it for the money that you need to buy a better computer, which he did. And then the teacher took the kids that are all playing this with each other and says, all right, we have a team. And they started competing around doing all these little hackathons and all these different things, which they won, both in Singapore and in the whole South region, South Asian region. The inability to do math was only one element, but had all of this other talents that brought him eventually up to the top universities. And I think where we have problems, and this is school counselors, because this is how we're taught, right? I do training. They focus on the academic. You can't do math, therefore you can't. You can't do this, you can't do, you don't have the grades, you can't. Our kids are playing Minecraft. Those are engineers. My son has the same story of not being able to do the basic multiplication, but could talk about physics and could talk about engineering a spaceship and sending it to Mars with language I don't even know existed, but it's all part of that physics and geometry and all this other stuff that's way above his grade. In fourth grade, he was testing out as a sophomore in geometry. So there are ways our youth are learning and can learn, and one of the big gatekeepers is our inability to see the potential. And I saw what somebody wrote earlier on one of the chats during one of our sessions, really focusing on talent, not on interests, not on grades. What's the talent that's inside that child? So that was a long speech. Were we able to get Amy back? Is she?
She's having problems with her. It's a setting in her Chrome browser and on her laptop. So
boy.
I hope we can
Amy.
get her to share her story at another time.
Well, if she could sell some of those, newfangled things on eBay, we can get her back on with a better computer. I'm sorry, Amy. We'll try to figure this out. Are some other thoughts, or anyone want to come off that has a comment based on what they've been hearing? We've got about 15 minutes. And would love to hear some more voices. Thank you, Karen. That was awesome. Really good stuff. We did hear something about school counselors being too busy. That's why it's a team sport. And I will tell you this, for your school counselors are too busy. One of the most busiest things they have to do in the high school is every fall, they have to sit and do all the reprogramming changes. I have had more than one school counselor come up to me and say, once they started the personalized career and academic plans in fall, they have exactly 0 program changes. Because who's driving the ship? The students. They know what they need to take, and they're getting it set up in spring, and they know, and they're invested in that program. So some of this work actually makes it easier down the road as they go along, but totally do understand that they're busy. And that sometimes, and that's what Colorado did, is one of the reasons they're so busy is because the ratios in their schools are too high. And once Colorado started bringing it down, I think they're down to about 340 to 1, but that's not where they started a few years ago. And just getting down to, and that's what we want to study in our condition of career readiness report, is to see, is there a sweet spot in states that have been bringing this ratio down where we can see some increases on some of these other key outcomes. So we think that that's one of the big ones.
Scott, are there any sticky notes from employers or any employer organizations here that have, what would they like to see? Have you seen any? I can't see the sticky note side.
All right.
While he's looking, can I just add a comment? This is Jan. Because I think all the discussion's been fascinating, and we keep focusing on a lot on counselors, and you're right, we have so much there. You know, as I looked, and this isn't just career development, I've heard it from superintendents and from other schools. If the person, and we heard it from Brian actually, if the person who's in the leadership at the top, the principal of the school, the president of the career college, whatever it is, doesn't support it and believe in it, you know, people pay attention and focus on what they're being held accountable for. But at the end of the day, that's really, in my mind, it's as simple as that, what they do. So if they're not held accountable for the career development, the success of an individual, of a student. I mean, let's face it, a student graduates high school, and how much does the high school follow and really care? Have they gone anything, even what's in their plan? Has it followed along, or what kind of advisement? I met a principal of a school, it was a failing school. Now, this isn't about career development, it's the process. And he determined that the failing school was literacy. And, you know, everybody was illiterate, the students by and large, that was a problem. He made it part of the system that every counselor, every teacher, every support person was held responsible for literacy, they integrated into their curriculum, into what they did with the students. Their in-service was around it. That's how they were evaluated. In 2 years' time, the scores, and this again is reading scores, but came up significantly, and he was awarded teacher or principal of the year by the national organization. But I think the question becomes, how do we engage more people like Brian as well? Yes, industry has to be at the table, but if we don't have, whether it's a state superintendent, a principal school, president of a community college, behind it and understanding it, it doesn't get to the point where it needs to. And so the question is, how do we create more Bryan Albrechts? I've said that on a number of occasions, but yeah. So that to me is a big issue.
No, that's a good one. And what I want to do is just pivot a little bit, Jan, because I agree that that's an important part. I'm going to ask, I'm a little nervous to ask this, but Sam Bottom, are you available? Can you come off mute and talk for a second? I've got a couple questions and thoughts.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we hear a lot is, and I think you would agree, is the need to make sure that we're graduating students with skills that align to the workforce needs of the region, right? I mean, am I on target? Am I understanding that as a key piece?
Yep, absolutely.
So what I'm thinking, let me tell you what I've heard. I've heard that when employers see and listen to students talk about their personalized career and academic plan, they no longer say that. That when they actually listen to you talk about what they've learned, what they're planning to do with what they have and the different pathways, that they see the school as in a completely different way. And so that's what I'm wondering is how can we help business become more connected, I guess, to that kind of story development. I mean, we can have the schools figure out, create these things, and we've seen it happen where they open the gym up and they have the seniors, you know, interviewing with business. But it just seems like this is a way that sells education and what we're really doing, as opposed to waiting each year and looking at test scores, right? This is a different way of seeing what's happening inside the school. I just wanted to get your thought about that.
No, yeah, there's a lot that you're speaking to there. I'll just pick up one strain of it, which is, you know, you use the word selling. And I think that's part of our challenge, right? We have a selling and marketing challenge as far as exposing kids to the broader set of career pathways and career options. And we have a broader societal issue has been talked about throughout the whole conference around it not just being about going to a four-year college or other, but in fact talking about all the different pathways and how those pathways could still lead to, you know, the Mark's example of the welder. You may start off with a two-year education and then decide you want to get further education from there. So one pathway does not preclude the other. And so I think to your question, it's about marketing and selling the appeal and the possibilities, and that it's not an exclusive either or choice, but in fact, right, a process that we all build on. I think most of us would admit in hindsight that at least this is true for me, I think it's true for many people, our careers are perhaps not as linear and straightforward as we sometimes describe, or others may describe them, right? A lot more ping-ponging and bouncing around, and there's always themes and connections with the choices we've made. But I think we do a lot of kids and other adults a disservice by not being sort of more open and transparent about that.
No, thank you, Sam. And that is why we need them to have multiple pathways. I'm using the word on-ramps, that seeing the different on-ramps, as Brian was saying, kind of like a lifelong learner, is I'm seeing how my opportunities open up and what can I do to expand future opportunities. But the thing I wanted to go back to, Sam, in this is this idea of the two-way street, that I know, bringing up Sheboygan again, but this is where it happened. It's happened also up in northern Wisconsin too. But the employers got so excited about how the school was wanting to advance, and it was advanced manufacturing, how they wanted to make that a core component of the curriculum, and they let the business community help design that curriculum, that they went and raised $4.5 million to build the building and put the manufacturing in the school. That to me is business believing in schools as connecting the dots between what we need and what you're willing to do, right? So to me, it's not a waiting game. It's a how do we create the relational dynamic with the school and the community needs, so that we can get on the same page with what we're striving to do. And I think that this is where, again, the personalized career and academic plan comes out, because we can use students who've had that experience and found those alternate pathways to become our spokespeople, like this young woman did in Sheboygan when she became the nurse. She became their health pathways spokesperson. She developed all these leadership skills, talking to business about what we're doing and how we're making it work. So, but I'll pause there. I see you nodding, so I'm hoping I got a good line.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, Scott. And I think we need people who can serve as bridges and translators, if you will, between sectors, because I think so often, right, if you're in the business sector, nonprofit and government, they're black boxes. And if you're in government, the other two sectors are black boxes. And if you're in education or nonprofit, you think the other two are black boxes, right? And so the more people we have that can serve as those connectors, and I think Bryan Albrecht, who's on here, is a great example of that. I think he has served as a very strong connector for us, both locally, and I do have to admit, I live on the Illinois side, so I cross the channel every day.
Wow.
But I've become a fan of Wisconsin, to be sure. But I just had to get that out. But the reality is, Bryan has really shown us pathways, and together through dialogue, as he's better understood where we're coming from, we've built a very strong partnership in Southeast Wisconsin, but more importantly, I think nationally, we've helped advance some different models and some different causes. And we've only done that effectively because we've been working with Bryan and others like Roger Tedeschi and Jan Bray and Leo Reddy and many others who serve as those translators, as those bridge builders. And we only get, to your point, Scott, more and more engaged as we better understand how we might effectively work together. But right, you have to come to the table somewhat humble and willing to know that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Scott, this is Leo. I want to add a couple of points to what my friend Sam just mentioned, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
First of all, I'm certainly a member of the Bryan Albrecht fan club, and also love Snap-on and all the great things they do there. But I just wanted to add a couple of specific points. If you recall, kind of the paradigm for a career pathway that defines the work we've been doing so far in the coalition, I think we've identified two very specific activities that would do a great deal to make sure that the interest of the economy and the interest of the students are much more closely stitched together. The misalignment between what the economy needs and what education is offering has always been the elephant in the room. It still is the elephant in the room, but two measures that I think would make a huge difference that we've already put on the table. Number one, that all students would have some kind of a high quality industry certification in their chosen career pathway. Start beginning in high school, at least beginning to work on that in high school. And the report of our quick committee identified leading industry certification bodies in every single one of the industry sectors of the country. It isn't just manufacturing, but we identified 53 other certification bodies to cover all 20 sectors of the economy. We use 20 in NAICS, you could use 17, but anyway, all industry sectors. That's very important. So one way to make sure these students already have disposed to industry is to secure one of those credentials or partially. The second one, even more valuable, is the summer internship program. So that in their junior and senior years, all students would actually work in a firm, an organization in their area of interest. What better way to actually get to meet people for those companies to get to meet you and to begin to really secure a much closer connection with your employer. I think those two very, very, very practical measures that we should keep in mind. I just want to mention that.
Thank you, Leo. And I totally agree with you. And yet, even if we do that, because it is happening, there's a lot of places, Kansas is a great example, it's happening. But if we don't have a process to help employers become aware of the fact that the skills they're coming out with are the skills they're asking for, then we have issues. And I think it's only through more engagement with the employment community directly with our youth to really showcase that is one of the things that I think we need to do, and also helping youth learn how to communicate about it. Sam, we've only got a couple minutes. I just want to thank you both for your leadership and engagement, but it's so great to have industry voice in this conversation. And I know you're having to sit with a bunch of state educators as we're kind of going through the different thoughts, but I want that also because then you can kind of hear where they're at on it, but we also got to anchor it back in where's industry and how can we learn how to communicate better. I won't have time today, but I want to another shout out to Castle. They've done a nice job of looking at those employer skills and then putting them in the frame of social emotional learning, or what we're calling the human skills. You heard Orrin talk about that, these deeper human SEL skills. And it's a way that when we can help our youth identify how they have those skills, but more importantly, how to communicate in a job interview that they have these skills, right? And that's where it comes to it, is can they help you as an employer understand that, yep, these are the skills I've developed that you've been asking for in a way, in a way that they're assertive and have a brand that connects with your business. So we have a lot of work to do on all those elements. And Leo's point is well taken. We got to continue to build their capacity, but there's a lot more. But Sam, I just want to thank you for coming on and being part of this. Great.
Thank you. No, I appreciate being able to learn from everybody. And I am a recovering ex-government official and educator. So perhaps that's why I enjoy this so much.
All right, that's great. And I'm glad you brought Mark Perna's comments up yesterday, Mark. That was really a great, it's a testimonial that it's not just thinking about alternative pathways, it's coming up with alternative pathways to those 4-year degrees where you've got employers investing in you in new ways. And that whole thought, I don't think people have really understood that we can start figuring out which companies will invest in you if you invest in them. And so I think it was a really good case example, and I want to thank you for that. It's a good one to keep in mind. We are right at the 4:29 mark, aren't we?
Right. So we just have one more slide, because one of the early issues we're finding as we try to capture, as Leo said, who's earning industry recognized certifications, who's doing this work-based learning, is sometimes getting that data is very problematic. So we thought we'd put this slide out there to see if you could help us answer this. Basically, which one of the following data points does your state even collect for all students? Mind you, this is now being required under Perkins 5 for CTE concentrator students. But if you don't fall in that definition, is your state still going to collect it in its state data system? And it's really interesting to find it's all across the board. So we'd love to hear some responses. If you don't know, we get it. But if you're a state recognized or work at the state level, you know some of these, it can be real challenging. So we'd love to have you click on that. And I'm going to give it like another minute, and then we'll stop sharing and hand it back over to Jan. Scott, did you have any final words?
Well, thank you, everyone. This was fabulous. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I can't wait to look through all those Post-its, and we will be getting those summarized so we can get that directly into our thoughts as we're writing our report and doing the data analysis. Looking forward to fall and connecting, and also looking forward to next year when we release this first report, and hope that it's something that you can all feel is supporting your needs as we go forward. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And Jan, we'll give it back to you.
We will. Thank you all.
Thank you, Scott and Robin. That was really, I love the interaction. I mean, the way you guys planned the interaction was phenomenal. And I think it was a great discussion. And really, I know continues the thinking we have of how the coalition moves forward to really address these issues and to make a difference. So this was, the engagement of everyone yesterday and today has really driven the conversation forward. And that's what we wanted. And so I have to say, at least for me, the goal was achieved, because, we weren't going to solve it today. We wanted the ideas, we wanted the comments, and I think the engagement of everyone made that difference. So as we bring the conference to a close, we actually have two very key people, both you've heard from already this afternoon, that are going to really sort of tie this together and reflect on what they've heard and how we move forward. So let me first ask Bryan Albrecht, Dr. Bryan Albrecht. He moderated the session yesterday, but Bryan, your thoughts on what's next? Where do we go? What did we hear that we have to move?
Well, thank you, Jan. And let me just first start out by thanking all of the participants in the last 2 days events, our speakers, our sponsors, the CCD leadership team, those that stuck with us now all the way through to the end. Your input is really what's helping shape and guide the research agenda, the discussion level agenda with policymakers, and how we can implement some of these new strategies at the local level. So I'm grateful on behalf of the board and appreciative of your time, and look forward to continuing the dialogue at future events. As you'll hear, we're going to continue to roll out these discussion groups and bring more people into the conversation. So it would be silly for me to think that I could try to, capture everything that was said in the last 2 days, because it's really powerful, and I have a lot of notes that I'm going to reflect on myself personally to kind of help influence my work here at the college. And just as a brief signal of how quickly things change in all of these environments, while we're on Zoom all day, the CDC changed their mask policy. So now I got to go back and change all of our own practices back at the college tonight. It's a very moving and fluctuating environment we live in. And I think that's a good reminder of all that we heard. A couple of key themes that I think I'm walking away with: this idea of transformation, and we're living through it right now, right? We're living through transformation in the way education is being delivered, which will impact the way people make decisions about the coursework they take, the pathway they choose, the build out and the relationships between middle school, high school and college, and ultimately college and work. And we heard it explained in so many different variations of how we can do a better job of sharing information and building those capacities, whether it's through the technology discussion we had, through the policy discussions we had, or the best practices of the individual committees. It focused on the idea of talent, and I think that resonated really well with our industry panel, that if I could summarize it in one word, it would be jobs, jobs, jobs. And we're seeing that play out every day in our community, that the skilled worker shortage is growing at exponential rates, and that's going to drive salaries and personal income, and ultimately then decisions by young people and their parents about where you can make a good family wage and what kind of skills you're going to need in order to do that. So all of these things are intertwined. While we're going through a transformation, we're also going through a rapid growth in the economy based on new sector skills, which is what Mark brought out. That we've got to think differently about the types of skills that are what might have been considered entry level or employability based 5 years ago are totally different today. We learned a lot about digital literacy, and that we're all continuing to find new pathways to learn basic skills now to communicate, whether it's our personal life or our work life. And I think as we think about the impact that we can have collectively on the group, is how do we influence the institutions that we're responsible for? So transformation and the concept of the changing economy as it evolves, in the middle is this bridge building with teachers, counselors, parents, policymakers, and in our own fears of responsibility, like Sam mentioned, the black box, we have a responsibility. So for some reason, we are on this call together as leaders, and we have to step up to that challenge. And now that we know better, we need to inform better. So we need to do a better job of investing and supporting our own staff, whether they're teachers or counselors or business partners, to get involved in this discussion and to really think seriously about supporting the talent pipeline at all levels. We know that we're in a sweet spot, career and technical education. We heard that. Kim explained it in her presentation, that there's a great history and a foundation already built and an engagement process. We can inspire youth by giving them application, whether it's work-based learning or some applied methodology. It might be dual credit. There's a lot of ways to incentivize young people, but we know what the sweet spot is. It's CTE. And I think our work will continue to drive the transformation of career and technical education to raise the visibility. And I think I mentioned in my part to kind of focus on that idea of the dignity of work and bring that back to the reality that there is dignity in all work, and there are multiple pathways to get to that work based on your own passion. One thing that resonated with me, and I wrote it down 3 times, and I'm going to keep saying it. I think it's this idea around, we heard that the gender gap, closing it by 10% can close the skills gap by 50%. So while we focus in that case on the gender gap, let's keep in mind the whole broad initiative around equity and inclusion. And the more we can diversify our experiences and give our young people kind of role models and examples through all kinds of scenarios that we shared today, through mentoring, through best practices, through connecting with industry, through internships, if we can broaden our definition of what a qualified workforce is, we can begin to address some of the challenges that face our workforce. So I think that's a key one, 10 to 50. I'm going to remember that one as my takeaway. And then today, rich discussion today, and I'm not going to go through all the details because we all just went through it together, but there is no lack of work for any one of us to do. The good news is we all now have a stronger network because we all know each other, and we know where we can tap into and rely on each other to give us good advice and to begin to build our own internal capacities. And the more we do that, the stronger we will be regionally. The stronger we are regionally, the more power we have to influence state policy. The more state policy we have influence over national policy. So thanks to Leo and Jan and Spencer and everybody that is really doing the behind the scenes work on all of this work. Scott, your research agenda is critical to our long-term success. And as a board, the CCD is really here to just help guide the ship. And I'll close it like this, to turn the light on at the end of the tunnel, to make sure that we're all taking a step every day toward that light. Mark, you resonated that message very strongly for all of us, that we are all in tunnels and we're all looking for the brighter future. And that's what our work is collectively about. And I think we made a big step in that direction with our original opening statement that Leo brought to us. The purpose was to build a national consensus around making career readiness the first priority in American education. So that's our goal, and that's how I'll end my comments today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I love that. Turn the light on at the end of the tunnel. I think that's great. That is really good. So thank you. That sums it up really nicely. And before I turn it back over to Leo to close this out, I do want to encourage all of you, one, to go up and visit the CCD Center's website. It's ccd-center.org. Spencer, you might want to put that in the website. There you go. Thank you. It's easier to write than to say. But we're also we'd like you to share what you are doing. So, we continue the learning from each other, so that if you go to the website, you'll be able to find out what's going on around there. And I will say this conference isn't the end of the discussion. As Brian has said, it is the beginning. We have a lot to do moving forward. It's been exciting to hear all that was said. The CCD Center Board of Directors is on top of that and very engaged. We have a significant advisory council. If you are interested in being part of it, please contact me. And this is an important issue that we are very pleased to be able to embrace, think about, and engage a broad audience with what is working out there. Where are the gaps, and how do we all work together? How do we engage to close those gaps? And with that, Leo, I'm going to turn it over to you for allowing us to have some final remarks. And
thank you, Jan. I really sincerely want to congratulate Brian on a masterful summary of 2 days of complex meetings. He did a wonderful job. I'm not going to replicate anything he said at all, although I have my own notes of other highlights of the conference that I enjoyed. I really want to address myself a little bit more to process. I said at the beginning, the board wanted to see this meeting as a way to further develop and refine our ideas to be well prepared for a summit meeting that we're planning in the fall. So we have a little bit more work to define the exact time and date of that summit. We're going to be working on that and getting back to everybody shortly on that one. But that was really the main task. I really, on behalf of the board, I want to congratulate everybody for this meeting. I think we've served up the purpose quite well. I tried to help a little bit by my opening remarks by kind of reminding everybody that we do have a well-defined roadmap that we've been developing over several years. But the conference and all the ways that Brian defined and others really did add a great deal of value and gave us other enrichments to that roadmap that will be very valuable going forward. I think we also succeeded in identifying major opportunities along the way. Certainly one of them of the President's initiatives, the American Job Opportunities Initiative combined with infrastructure, $2.1 trillion, I believe, over 10 years. That's notable. The American Families Plan is another $1.8 trillion and has quite a lot in there about subjects that are of great interest to us. So we're certainly aware of those. I also wanted to point out the fact that the Business Roundtable has come out with a pronouncement about the social responsibility of industry, which is very, very interesting and quite groundbreaking, and gives us an opportunity to look to industry and a good excuse to get back to industry, say, okay, now you want to contribute more to our communities and to our workforce training. We have a lot of good ideas on how you might do that, such as employer-funded summer internship programs, which is one of my favorites. We, of course, are studiously nonpartisan. We're also looking at GOP responses, and that's being worked out. We're also very attentive to state policy as well as federal policy. We have a lot of strengths and soundness in our basic platform. In terms of next steps, I think that what we're going to do is analyze carefully the results, the notes we've taken on all the discussions today, and we're going to pull together some issue papers. I'm not sure if it's going to be one or several, but basically, well-defined policy briefs, if you will. And in the course of doing that, we're going to be consulting with all the members of the board, all the members of the advisory council, to see if we can build consensus, really a pretty solid consensus across the entire coalition around these propositions. Now, if we can manage to do that, given the power and scope of our coalition, which is certainly very powerful if you put together the board and our advisory council, that'll really give us a very, very strong position to begin communicating our suggestions widely throughout the country, and certainly to prepare for a summit meeting that will bring to the table a very mature, well-researched, carefully thought through coalition position, which I think will greatly enhance our impact, because we are trying to make sure that we do get the resources and we get the support to actually build the road for which we build the map. We do need the resources to accomplish everything we've set out for ourselves. And that summit meeting will give us an opportunity to really try to pin down those resources. So I think it's been a grand meeting, and I think it's certainly, we'll be very happy to report back progress to the board and look forward to a lot of really, very meaningful work over the coming weeks. Thank you.